You're tuned in to HorrorSlop, where the stories are rotting, truth is twisted, and sleep, forget about it.
Yeah, welcome to the pit. It's gross, it's creepy, and honestly, it's kind of my vibe. Hope you like nightmares, because tonight's tale, it slithers.
Straight from the darkest corners of Reddit. Real stories, real fear, and just enough blood to stain your soul.
So at least grab your bed sheets, so grab a flashlight, and maybe a therapist.
This is HorrorSlop. Every night starts somewhere, and this is where yours begins. First story, first chill. Let's see if you make it to the end.
I share a room with my autistic brother. He's been talking in his sleep, by Sergeant Darwin. A lot of autistic children are difficult to handle, but my brother Lucas isn't one of them. His 16 years on this earth have not inconvenienced my family in the least. In fact, I can say that of all the autistic kids I've met, Lucas is the sweetest and gentlest. I'm not just saying that because his family, neighbors, teachers, and friends constantly note his calm disposition with surprise. The first thing I noticed was that his voice sounded different. My first thought was that somebody else was in our room. I almost would have preferred that. What I heard that night, and many nights since, was undoubtedly Lucas's voice, but sharper, clearer, somehow more intelligent. Honestly, it's how I think his voice would sound if he were not autistic. I couldn't get back to sleep that night. Things were normal the next day. Lucas played video games, watched Teletubbies, and paced around our room. If anything was wrong, he didn't know it. I even interrupted Star Wars Battlefront 2 and asked him, "Luke, did you sleep good last night?" But he just nodded. "Yeah," I said, and he replied with an affirmative, "Sleep good," his eyes never leaving the screen. Then he started making the whale noises from Finding Nemo. Like I said, things were normal. I suppose I'm not sure how often he's talked in his sleep, but the next time it woke me up was a week later. It was loud. My parents sleep upstairs, so they didn't hear it, but they certainly would have if they were on our level. He was crying. Wait, Lucas continued, my girlfriend's words coming from his mouth. The parking lot, the church, Baptist church, south of State Street, but wait. At this, I snapped back to reality. Mom! Dad! I roared. Louder. Mom! Dad! Help! No, I'm turning left. I can see Starbucks, and the gas station, and, no, I see him. I see his lights. Hey! Help! Hey! Lucas was now screaming at the top of his lungs. My mother was screaming too, trying to shake him awake. But then his face started to relax, and his voice at once became more relieved. "Oh, thank God, thank you, he sobbed. Then he was quiet. When Lucas stopped talking that night, I dialed Anna with shaking hands. No answer. I sent her a text at 2:44, "Hey, this is gonna sound weird, but are you alright? Call me." "Sorry, I'll explain," and got this reply at 2:47, "Not really, I'll call, give me a few minutes." 26 agonizing minutes later, my phone rang. I listened to her story. A little after 2 o'clock in the morning she found herself in a hoodie and her pajama bottoms, barefoot, on an old dirt road near the industrial district. It's a small town, we still have a few unpaved streets. She didn't remember how she got there, but her feet were dirty, and she realized she must have walked. She knew where she was from the street signs, and found that she had her phone in the pocket of her hoodie. Panicking, she pulled it out to call someone, me, in fact, and she was struck, hard, in the back. She fell to the ground, scrambled to a sitting position, and turned her phone toward her attacker. He wore gym shorts and a hooded sweatshirt, and his face was too shadowed to see clearly. She tried to get up, and he grabbed her by the shoulders and threw her to the ground. They struggled for a few minutes, and she was badly beaten. The only shot she was able to get in was to viciously claw his leg with her long fingernails. Some of his skin and blood remained on her fingers when the police brought her in, the only evidence she was able to provide of her attacker. At the end of Anna's story, she asked how I knew she was in trouble. I told her about Lucas. She gave the phone to the police officer, and I related what my brother had said to him as well. He asked me and my parents to come to the station in the morning and make a statement. So, the next morning, my parents took both of us to the station. When we got there, there was a split second when Lucas, who was completely normal when he woke up, albeit very tired, and Anna looked at each other. Their eyes met, locked on one another's, and as soon as the moment began, it was gone. We made our statements, then asked the befuddled police officer, "Now what?" It was Lucas. 10.
Need a break? Too bad. These stories don't wait, and neither do we. Next one's worse, in the best way.
There was something very wrong with the foster kid my parents took in when I was 12 years old, by Peculiar. My parents were, and still are, a couple of hippies who met at a music festival back in the day. I found out later in life that they never wanted a biological child, and that my mother had always dreamed of adopting a little girl from China or Africa instead. Kind of a weird thing to learn while sharing a joint with your dad in the basement during spring break, but hey. My parents should have been more careful, though, since my mom got pregnant 2 years into their relationship. Picture the furthest thing from a trendy third world adoption and you'll get me, a preemie baby with albinism. They named me Blanche, which is French for white, because that seemed like a good idea to my mother at the time. I wasn't exactly thrilled by the news and didn't want to be there for all the stuff with the social worker, so I slipped out to the backyard. My parents were too excited to notice my absence and call me back inside, or maybe they just couldn't be bothered. "Hi," she said, walking over to me and sitting down on the second swing. "I'm Lena." "Hello," I replied, staring at my dirty sneakers. "My name is Blanche." "That's a beautiful name," Lena gave me a kind smile, "a beautiful name for a beautiful girl." "Ha," I snickered, feeling my face turning red. "It's too bad they gave it to me then." "Probably a witch," I remarked, shrugging my shoulders, though the compliment had pleased me. I was already warming up to Lena, something I hadn't expected. "So how come you had to come live with me and my dorky parents?" Lena stared at my house, now ours, for a minute before replying. "My mom died shortly after I was born and my father died in a house fire." "I'll be your friend," I replied gently, "we're practically sisters now." Lena beamed and embraced me before pulling away, her face suddenly serious as she lifted the blackened pan. "My father was not a good man, Blanche. I was happiest when he was away working or at the bar after work. Nights were the worst. I never knew when to expect him in my room, so I anticipated the pain every night and struggled to sleep. One evening I was in the kitchen, frying potato wedges on the gas stove when he came home early and drunk. He'd been fired from his job, and wanted to hurt me again. Pretty little things shouldn't be wandering off on their own, the man from the yard we'd passed snarled as he carried me back to his house. I tried to kick and wave my arms, but the street was entirely empty. He hadn't grabbed Lena and I hoped she had run to get help. "Please," I whimpered, my eyes darting left and right, trying to find a means of escape. The window looked like the only option, but I couldn't even see how to open the rotting, splintered frame. "Please don't hurt me." Suddenly, he leaped back and I looked up to see a look of alarm contorting his features. It took me a second to register what was wrong, but then the smell hit my nostrils, and smoke started to fill the bedroom. "What the blazing hell?" the guy screamed, forgetting about me as he turned and ran from the room to find the source of the fire. Lena dashed inside the moment he was gone. "Come on. You've got to get out of here," she said, grabbing my hand and pulling me after her as she ran down the stairs and out of the house. "Get to safety," she shouted, before turning the doorknob and walking back inside the house. I was overcome with so much panic that I didn't know what to do. As much as I didn't want to leave Lena alone in the house with that man, I also knew that I couldn't possibly find the courage to run back inside after her. So I took off, sprinting down the littered sidewalks of Lena's old neighborhood until the streets became cleaner, more familiar. Big houses with nice gardens, and people my parents knew waving me on as I rushed by. "Mom, Dad!" I screamed, barging through the front doors to see my parents and a strange man sitting around the dinner table with stacks of papers lining the surface. "It's Lena. She's in trouble." "Blanche, calm down," my mom said as she and Dad ran up to see if I was okay. The man followed at a respectable distance. "A man grabbed you," my mom's eyes widened in fear, then to my father, "We have to call 911. "No time." I started crying again. "Lena is still back there with him. We have to go help her right now." I pulled away from my dad and grabbed him by the hand, trying to pull him after me as I headed back to the door. "Honey, we're still only getting the paperwork sorted out," my dad's brow furrowed in concern. "This is Mr. Wilbank, he's the social worker who is handling our application. It may still be a while before anyone comes to stay with us." I don't know why Lena came to me that day. I guess she wanted someone to see where she came from and to learn the truth about her death. Wherever she is, I hope she knows how grateful I am for her help that day, and hope she can find some happiness in me sharing her story with the world. Me, TCC.
You're still tuned to HorrorSlop. Frequency unknown. Stories endless. Let's spin the next nightmare.
Daycare, by Dover Hawk. After dubious research, I found a daycare center that seemed like a good fit. It was run by a girl named Wendy and seemed fairly popular in the neighborhood, as there were a number of kids there when I went to investigate. One of the things I particularly liked about it was the fact that they had security cameras set up around the center so that parents can get access to them and check on their kids. After about a week, things seemed to be going quite well. My little girl had started really grasping potty training and was more well-behaved than I'd ever known her to be. Needless to say, I was impressed with the daycare. That was when she started singing the song. "We eat their teeth. We'll go to hell and have more fun." She sang it all the time, no matter how many times I had to ask her to stop. It made my skin crawl. Why would they teach a song like that to children? As I watched the children play on my computer screen, my little girl playing with the ball like she always did, I picked up my phone and called the daycare. I'd been pacing around my office as I spoke to her, and just as we were saying goodbye, I looked back down at the screen and noticed something peculiar. The Wendy on the screen was not on the phone, but was helping a child with his juice box. She said goodbye and hung up the phone, and I watched the cameras, not reciprocating her farewell, but transfixed on the screen in front of me. I stared at my daughter and her playing with her ball and tried to think of how many times I'd seen her drop it as they tossed it back and forth. I didn't think I'd seen that happen very much. And the kid in the corner was always in the corner, working on the same puzzle. How long had he been working on that puzzle? Part 2.
Alright, quick break before our next story. Let's check in with our resident spooky dude. Hey, you ever smile, or is your face just stuck that way?
I smiled once. The sky bled. A child vanished. Never again.
Okay, drama. Maybe next time just try a dad joke.
Knock knock. They never made it to the door.
Wow. Fine, stay moody. Anyways, back to the darkness. This next one's got teeth.
The house is burning. Only 2 of us made it out. There were 6 at the start of the evening. 7, I suppose. That was the entire problem. When Christoph and Marina got here, Angelo called out, "It's about time you 2 made it." He specified 2, I remember that. That's 5 arrivals, and of course I was there all along. Maybe the door was opened at some other point. We were playing cards when we noticed. It was a 6-handed game, and Angelo was dealing piles in front of each player. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and the 7th to himself. Angelo looked at the table in confusion. There were cards in front of each of us. There were 7 separate stacks. With a nervous chuckle, Angelo said, "Okay, what am I doing wrong?" 6 of us, yes. "Everyone put your hand on your card," he said. "While you're sorting this out, I'm going to go to the bathroom," said Kay, standing up. She left the room. Angelo dealt the cards. 1, 2, 3, 4, and a 5th to himself. "Kay, how many people are you?" he shouted. "Very funny," she called back. We heard the bathroom door close. "Just deal 6 hands," I told Angelo. "There are 6 of us. It'll work out. Everyone will pick 1 hand up and play it, and no one will be left out." I noticed that Kay's glass was still untouched from earlier. "Hey, where's Kay?" I asked. "She went to the bathroom," said Dina. "I guess." "Shall we deal another hand?" I asked. "The kitchen," said Marina. "The wine didn't bring itself in here," I pointed out. "And all 5 of the new glasses have been moved." "You've dealt 5 hands," Dina pointed out. We all looked at him quizzically, but he was serious. We reached out and took each other's hands, forming a circle around the table. "Now, in order. Everyone say the name of the person to your left." "Let's go to the right," he said. Angelo's name was said. He followed it with Dina. "Look at the table," Angelo said. "Why is there an extra glass of wine in between us?" "Let's take a photo," said Marina. "Then we can see everyone at once." She put her phone on the table. We all backed up, put our arms around each other and smiled. The photo snapped. We gathered back around the table to look. "Christoph," said Marina. "Kay," I said in the same moment. "He must still be in the kitchen," said Marina. "I'll go see." "I think we should all go together," said Angelo. "Come on." "Christoph must have dropped something on the stove," I said, heading over to see about turning off the gas. Nice of him to mention it. The knobs were broken too far down to turn. The gas was starting to give me a headache. I grabbed a hold of the stove to pull it out from the wall and shut off the line behind it, but it was surprisingly heavy. Christoph's body was crammed inside, the limbs bent and folded back on themselves in order to make it fit. A gory pool of blood filled the bottom of the oven, sloshing distressingly back and forth from my attempts to move the appliance. Most of it seemed to have come from his head, which had been violently crushed. His eyes bulged outward, staring at me. Her throat was ripped open. It wasn't when I turned back, and then it was. Nothing did it. It just happened. Her hands flew up to clasp her ruined neck, but it was far too late to hold anything in. She collapsed to her knees. Her hair was held back as she died, keeping her upright and facing forward so we could all see the panic and despair. I grabbed a knife and put my back into a corner, looking around frantically. Marina was gone. I hoped that she had run. I didn't like that I didn't know. The bathroom, I thought, but I pictured Christoph's broken body in the oven and I knew that I did not want to open the door to check. Angelo continued his rant, his voice cracking in his fury. We can't see it. We can't know about it. You and I thought we were holding hands when it was between us. This is all a game to it. We don't know how to play. We can't even see the board. We've got to get out, Angelo, I said. It's not safe to be in here. Even without whatever's happening, the stove's still leaking gas. It is, he said, and his voice was suddenly eerily calm. Everywhere. And you know, that's an awfully good way to deal with something you can't see. Angelo. I took a step toward him, but he pulled the lighter in toward his body. Go. If you don't go now, I'll do it while you're still in here. I probably ought to anyway. It's a better way to be sure. He flicked the lighter. It sparked. I fled for the door. Behind me, I could hear him flicking the wheel again. I scrambled along the grass, desperate to get further away. My back was burning, and I rolled to put it out. The house is clearly a loss, but I called the fire department anyway. I didn't know what else to do. I don't know what I'll tell the police when they find the bodies inside. I don't even know how many they'll find. One of them must have, though. I'm not alone out here. My hand is held tightly as I watch the house burn. / 10.
Sleeping yet? Didn't think so. Next story's up. And yeah, it's worse. You're welcome.
If Mommy asks if you're fine, you say yes, even if you're not, by polonium poisoning. I know I should blame my mother, but I don't, not after what happened to her. She truly atoned for her mistakes. Being a single parent is hard, living in poverty is hard. My brother Jacob and I were only a year apart, me being the older. I wonder now if we would be better off in foster care, but I know awful stories about that. At least I know she loved us, she never mistreated us or hit us, and she always got rid of her boyfriends when they were mean to us, even if their lazy asses helped pay the bills. Only people who lived in poverty know how little choice economically vulnerable women have when it comes to their relationships, because their income usually is not enough to house and feed their children. Jacob was really worried about me. I took a bath and we both sat in silence until Mommy came home. Back then, calling her wasn't an option. No, darling, she scrapped together a few coins. Here, go to the grocery store tomorrow and buy something called Modus. Ask the cashier lady to help you if you need, okay? Buy some bleach too. She sighed. On the next day, the grocery lady was really nice to me. I'll never forget how much she helped me, and how a complete stranger was the one to explain everything I was going through as a girl and a future woman. I went home and told Jacob about it while he helped me bleach the sofa. That's so crazy. Will this happen to me too? I was simple-minded, and I had so many other things to worry about. I even had to get a part-time job to help Mom. Even when I heard younger kids making mean comments about my brother, I was confident Jacob was strong enough not to care about random offenses. I wish I knew better. I don't know if that would be the right pronoun now, was too feminine. They told him to. After knowing the pain Jacob was going through, the thought of him never feeling anything again was soothing. But I still feel like half my mind, soul, and body died that day. I don't remember if it was on the third or fourth night that I heard Mom's horrible scream, but her room was always locked from the inside, so all I could do was listen close to the door. "Jacob," she muttered, in shock and fear. "Hello, Mom. Do you feel all right?" I am fine." "That's not what I asked. It's a little too late now." I thought I had to ask. Even if I couldn't handle to hear anything else, to hear your problems. I'm sorry for being bad for you. I'm so sorry. I had so many problems of my own I didn't have time for yours. I'm so sorry. When I had to go back to school, I noticed 5 boys from Jacob's class were completely covered in purple, greenish and black bruises. They apparently weren't so sorry. As I passed them on the hall, I couldn't resist the urge to ask if they were fine. As I suspected, they had learned a new lesson on the last few nights. They said yes. Even if they were not.
Whew, telling gave me chills. But hey, we're just getting started. The next one's sharper. You'll see.
Maybe I'll kill my prisoner, maybe I'll release her. Reddit will decide, by Abductor 2017. I knew even as a child that I was different, but it didn't become glaringly apparent until grade 1. A student died in the middle of the classroom directly in front of me, 22 horrified children, and a panicking teacher. His name was Stephen. He shook and convulsed on the ground. He foamed from the mouth. He pissed and shit his pants. My teacher tried her best to deal with the situation, but it was mayhem. I saw the terror in the other students' eyes. I saw how some of them laughed at first but turned to crying and screaming as the situation became more real. Me? I felt nothing. Nothing at all. Not even a trace. I knelt down and gave it a soft pet on its head, just from instinct. I'm supposed to pretend to like dogs. It licked me and started crying. But I of course felt nothing. Nobody was around. Nobody was watching. There was no need to continue the facade. So I stood up and started walking away. But the dog followed. I yelled at it to go away. Growled at it. But still it kept following. I don't even remember planning what happened next. Or even thinking about it. Before I knew it, I had picked up a large rock and smashed it down on the dog's head. See, it rolled and convulsed on the ground. It reminded me of Stephen. It looked at me. Its eyes now spoke of betrayal. And that's when it happened. It was just the smallest and tiniest of traces, but I felt something as I watched the last few shakes. Was it empathy? Regret over what I'd done? I'm not sure. But something was there. And it felt glorious. 2 months ago I moved on to humans. I've killed 3 women already. It was easy. I won't explain the exact process I used, but I'll describe the targets. It has to be small vulnerable women. They have to be drug addicts. They don't have to be homeless per se, but they have to be transient enough that there will be no suspicions when they go missing. I don't physically torture these women. Something about that feels too sick even for me. And I don't engage in anything sexual. I don't get any enjoyment out of sex anyways. But I do kill them. And with the first 2, that feeling came back again. But I learned with the third that I get desensitized to this far too quickly. I always need to move on to something bigger. Something different. And that's why we're playing this game. I'm saying this out loud to Lorraine as I type it, and the look in her eyes reminds me of the same hope and desperation I saw from that chihuahua. This is possibly the most exhilarated I've ever felt, and I'm already enjoying this far more than I ever imagined. An NBSP. 12, 15, 18, 18, 1, 9, 14, 5, 8, 1, 19, 2, 5, 5, 14, 18, 5, 12, 5, 1, 19, 5, 4, 6, 18, 5, 5, 4, 15, 13, 23, 1, 19, 28, 5, 3, 15, 4, 5.
Still with us? Good. That last one was just the warm-up. Let's go deeper.
Mom, Joey won't let me have my doll back. Joey, be nice to your sister. I replied half-heartedly, struggling to contain the niggling irritation I felt at my kids bickering at a time like this. I didn't care that they were small, couldn't they read the room? Wrangling my children while the entire church full of people looked at me with all that pity in their eyes. The good intentions were there, but I felt patronized. None of them dared to speak to me, not even my own family. I couldn't blame them. What were they supposed to say? The poor grieving widow. Drunk driver. A tragic accident. What if that tragic accident was your whole world? Ben. Ben and the kids were my whole world. I resented my mother when she came to see me the day I was discharged. Why did she bring the kids? I wasn't ready to parent again yet. Wasn't that obvious? I just had so much ripped away. She dumped those two insensitive little creatures on me, full of curiosity and questions while I tried to quietly grieve their dad. She didn't even say goodbye to them, just left them there, needy little parasites. Watching them breathe was a distraction, a soothing way to remind myself that something near me was alive. It was my worst fear realized, a part of me stolen. Or was it? I watched as my daughter Jade's chest rose and fell gently. She was only 6 years old. She would barely remember her father. Neither would her tiny brother Joey, only 4 years old in the next room. Raising them alone. Without my soulmate. Was that my worst fear? I flitted from room to room. Just watching my children and desperately avoiding sleep. Sleep bought dreams. Dreams I wasn't ready to see. Would I close my eyes and see Ben, the version of him I wanted to remember? No. I wasn't ready to sleep yet. Not ready to see it. I didn't make the children go to school. Who would? They didn't bat an eyelid at the change in routine. It was like their dad hadn't even existed. We spent those 2 weeks in a bubble of grief, them bickering over that stupid doll. Had they already forgotten him? Would they forget me too? Was that my worst fear? The funeral was planned quickly. I thumbed through catalogs of floral tributes while the kids bickered in the background, interrupting me at every heart-wrenching turn. When she repeated it, on the pew during the funeral, after I'd told Joey to be nice, I snapped. I couldn't take it anymore. The constant bickering was exhausting. Ben's mother started to approach me. I'd avoided her since his death. Every phone call, every time she knocked on the door. I couldn't bear to look at her. I needed to be able to watch them breathe that night, watch their tiny chests rise and fall under the duvet. To know that I wasn't alone. Ben's mother took a seat the other side of me. That was ridiculous. They were right there. Bickering. Right fucking there. Wait, no. My eyes darted around the cavernous room, hovering at breaks in the lights and chaos. There was more than one coffin in the room. Those other coffins were so small. I blinked, but the memory was too strong. I couldn't will myself back into that church no matter how hard I tried. I was stuck. Mom, Joey won't let me have my doll back. They were the last words I heard before the impact. In an instant I was catapulted, back into that vast empty church. Alone on the pew with the mother of my dead husband. It was never Jade, it was me, desperate to remember. I hadn't been able to see it before, the accident was so blurred. I was grieving. I didn't want to believe it, but now it was clear. My children were right behind me. They were right behind me during the accident and they died. I thought about it. Hard. I tried to process a million emotions at once as I stared at their tiny coffins. Was this whole situation my worst fear? You'd think so, wouldn't you? Isn't it yours? I took a deep breath as mourners left the hall. I tried to scramble to my feet, to walk out and prepare for life without them. A miserable existence on my own. Just as I turned to exit the row, I was shaken by a little voice. TCC.
You feel that? That weird pressure in the room? Yeah. That's the algorithm. It knows you're watching, and it gets real cranky when you don't feed it. A simple ritual helps. Click the little thumbs up, tap subscribe, say its name 3 times into your phone mic. Kidding, probably.
Engagement appeases the darkness. You know what to do.
Good, human. Now, back to the horror.
I checked in, got a neat little bracelet with my capsule number, as well as a key to a small locker for my stuff. I somehow managed to wedge my oversized luggage in there. I took a shower, and then headed to my capsule for sweet, sweet sleep. If you've never heard of capsule hotels, just imagine a morgue, except instead of a wall of tiny human freezers, it's full of neat slightly larger sleeping areas tall enough to sit up and use a laptop, and long enough to sleep in, but not much else. As I crawled into capsule 616, I noticed a little light indicator come on outside the capsule to indicate it was occupied. Sweet. I pulled the door down, played with every single knob on the wall just because I could, and once I figured out how to turn the lights off, my head hit the pillow and it was off to dreamland. For about 10 minutes. That's when I remembered the buttons on the wall. I pawed around until I turned the lights on, and then found the knob for the white noise. Bless you, Japan, for your practical technology. My little capsule was soon filled with the sound of rain and thunder easily overpowering the voice from my neighbor's capsule. I could still hear her, sure, but she was a whisper in a typhoon. I dimmed the lights, closed my eyes, all was right with the world, for, you guessed it, about 10 minutes. Intermixed with the synthetic storm was the wailing of a tornado siren. It took me a long time to realize it wasn't meant to be there, and that it was coming from my neighbor. At this point, it was about 2 in the morning, I was tired, I was cranky, I just wanted a few hours of sleep before another fun-filled day of adventure. I was internally cursing at whatever inconsiderate fucking tourist starts screaming in their goddamn capsule in the middle of the goddamn night, knowing full well everyone could hear her. In my frustration, I made my one big mistake. I slammed my fist into the wall and screamed, "Shut the fuck up." Screaming, she hit the wall so hard, I swear to God it felt like my entire capsule was shaking. It was like she was full-on body slamming it with all her might, all while screaming so loud I could barely hear the storm anymore. I put my hand on the wall and I felt it buckle as she thrashed against it. I backed away into the opposite wall, but I could still feel every slam as though it was coming from the capsule to my left instead of my right. I'd had enough. I was going to go see if the concierge was still awake and see what they could do about putting me on another floor or kicking this jerk out. I opened my capsule door and jumped onto solid ground. The little occupied light at the foot of my capsule turned off after a few seconds. The noise stopped, the banging ceased, and my breath caught in my throat. I spent the night on a bench in the locker room. I know I probably should have left entirely, but I was spent.
Something's still listening, and it wants more. Next story. Just don't say its name.
The town my great-grandfather lived in as a boy had a rule: no one was allowed to speak after sundown, by Wichita night. If people didn't leave before it started getting late, they'd be chased out. Sometimes ushered faux politely, sometimes outright scared off. But these guys, 5 of them, were young and boisterous, and they didn't like being nagged at. He heard them yelling something, and in a moment of pure stupidity on his part, his words not mine, he tried to open the window a crack to hear them better. He'd never heard such tones, what with how the town rationed words. Luckily his mother stopped him and dragged them both away from the window. They were yelling back and forth at each other, perhaps still half drunk or just acting like the hooligans they were. My great-grandfather waited with trepidation, waited for some kind of bogeyman to descend upon them and snatch them away. His uncle got to the door before he did. There on the doorstep was one of the young men from last night, the whites of his eyes bulging and red, his face etched with horror and sweat. His uncle opened the door fully and the rest of the young men were visible, trembling some ways down the street. My great-grandfather didn't realize until later that one of them might have been dead. He remembered the man's head lolling to one side as he lay on the ground. An empty expression was plastered on his face. No blood. No scars. Pale. One could have assumed he was drunk still. He recalled the way the man's arms were tucked in against his chest like he'd been cold, even though it had been a mild night. With a look that was flat and cold his uncle said, "What happens? Did they kill that man?" There were 5 family members: brother, sister, parents, uncle.
That last one tasted like fear and poor decisions. Let's see what the next bite stirs. Hope you're hungry.
I Think My Wife and Kids Are Actors, Part 2, by Hyper Obscura. Part 1. And number X200B. And number X200B. I was just about to close my eyes when the doorbell rang. I sighed deeply as I slouched towards the door. My energy levels were dangerously low, and my mind was wandering all over the place. I really couldn't carry a conversation in this state, so I was hoping it was only some kids pranking me or something. I opened the door hesitantly, only to be greeted by the creepiest smile I had ever seen. And number X200B. He offered me a square box, wrapped in brown paper. He pointed to the label on top of it. "That your name?" he asked. "The lies have become the truth have become the lies, yes," he said just as I was about to close the door. "What was that?" I asked super rhetorically. "Oh, you'll come around," he laughed heartily. "Do say hello to the missus for me, will you?" And number X200B. I immediately ran to the living room window, keenly watching the stranger's every move. He just stood by the door for a solid minute, before turning on a dime and pacing down the street with some haste. I shook my head in frustration. I felt like I had walked into a Twilight Zone episode or something. Everything just seemed slightly too absurd to be real. I placed the box gently on the living room table. It was light, and about the size of a medium-sized box, I guess. I eyed it suspiciously, contemplating all the possible bizarre things that could fit inside it. A severed head. Sure, but there'd be some blood or something, right? Not if it was wrapped in plastic, though. A bomb? That would be too mundane, surely. Some sort of elaborate puzzle gizmo I'd spend days figuring out. That sounded more like it. I paced around the table restlessly. I knew I was bound to open it at some point, so there really wasn't anything to wait around for. I gently unwrapped it and opened the lid with utmost care. And number X200B. And number X200B. I woke up in darkness. I must have slept through the day. I got up from the couch yawning, slouching over to the kitchen to get some water. That's when it hit me. Why didn't my wife or kids wake up me when they got home? I gargled the water thoughtfully. I walked over to the nearest window and peered through the curtains. No car in the driveway. I remembered the picture then. Had it been a threat all along? Were they in some kind of danger? Without thinking, I bolted up the stairs and threw open the door to Aaron's bedroom. Empty. Priscilla's bedroom. Empty. Our bedroom. Empty. I felt my heart racing, and my mind kept wandering back to the eerie mailman. And his smile. That knowing, creepy grin. And what was that he said? The lies has become the truth has become the lies. Was that some sort of veiled threat? Did he abduct my family? Or no, who did? Were they even in danger? And number X200B. And number X200B. But wait. There was something that had slipped my mind. And number X200B. I hurried downstairs and uncovered the paycheck crumpled up into the cracks of the couch. I brought it over to the kitchen counter and studied it thoroughly. There was no phone number on it, but there was an address. I looked it up quickly on my phone. It was apparently registered to some sort of legal firm downtown, Vernon and Love. There was only one phone number listed on their info, so without delay I punched it in and hit dial. And number X200B. You have reached Vernon and Love, this is Gladys speaking, how may I be of assistance? My voice failed me. I tried putting together words that made any amount of sense, but failed miserably. I considered just hanging up, but instead I remained on the line, breathing heavily. Jessie, the woman whispered hoarsely. Is that you? Hello. Are you still there? Okay, but did you at some point, I started. I am sorry, I just can't help you. Goodbye. She hung up. And number X200B. 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 Except for one rather important detail. And number X200B. Final part.
Anyway, let's lighten the mood with something fun and... Nah, just kidding. It gets worse. Hit it.
Working at an amusement park, The Laughing Cowboy and the Sugar Plum Fairy, by Girl from the Crypt. Those who have read my first post will know that half of the actors at the amusement park I work at aren't really actors. We call them pretenders, not actors or monsters, plain and simple. Also, just saying, I had some trouble thinking of a shorter and less misleading title this time. I get it, I had it coming, but the joke about the unpaid actors got old really fast. It appears I have to preface this one by answering some frequently asked questions regarding Mr. Scratch. About his anatomy, I guess I could have made myself more clear. Imagine a huge, detailed costume as it would be worn by an actor in a theme park. Now imagine the costume as an animal. The outer layer is made of fabric and the fur is artificial, but there's a whole bunch of functioning organs, blood and muscle tissue inside. It's a costume and it is a living, breathing thing. And it does defecate. For some reason, a lot of you wanted to know that. They clean out his cage once a day when I'm out walking him about. I also mentioned him running off before. He only did it twice and to be honest, it wasn't that big of a deal. The first time it was actually my fault. My hands had grown sweaty from having held the leash for so long and he was in a bit of a funky mood that day, so when he gave the chain one hard, strong pull, I lost my grip on it and it flew out of my hand. he didn't get very far either. I'm a fast runner and he only managed to make it to one of the ice cream parlors before I caught up to him. This name is painted in large, black letters onto the wooden sign welcoming visitors into the Western-style town. You'll find the most gorgeous, old-fashioned wood roller coaster in there. It's my personal favorite and I'm guilty of sneaking rides on it during my break times when there aren't as many visitors around. The Laughing Cowboy. It was a particularly busy day and the park was bustling with visitors. I had been walking the sock puppet around for about 3 hours straight and had noticed him getting a bit tired, so I brought him back to his cage. It had been newly cleaned and padded out with some fresh hay. He seemed very relieved and happily marched inside once I let him off his leash. I locked the door behind him before making my way back to the main plaza where I would often walk about. Now, you need to know that during seasons in which we expect a lot of visitors, us actors carry around walkie-talkies in case something happens and we need to inform the others. They aren't management issued, Dale could not give less of a damn about if we have a hard time or not. Someday, an actor just came up with the idea and bought a bunch of them. Hello? Hi, anyone from the horror section? Guys, I need someone from the horror section, come in, please. Hurry. The distorted voice on the other end stayed silent for a little while before finally answering. Oh. I get it, you must be the new tamer. Are you with Mr. Scratch right now? Shoot. Okay man, what's he look like? Mitchell cleared his throat. Cowboy attire, you know, large hat, leather vest, chaps and boots. Cleft lip and black teeth. Will do. See you then. Oh, wait, one more thing. He doesn't talk, but he laughs an awful lot. Don't let it get to you, he only wants to creep you out. After this rather bizarre conversation, I instantly set out for the break room. The one in our part of the park is not very large, but it offers a space for Darius and me to change clothes, a table we sometimes eat at as well as a small bathroom with merely a sink and a toilet. Upon entering the room, I immediately spotted him. A man in a cowboy hat was sitting at our table with his back turned to me. I was really trying to sound confident, but something about the way he was sitting perfectly still and the strange silence that hung in the air just made my skin crawl. No reply. Instead, the cowboy's shoulders began shaking slightly. Dude, you're starting to get on my nerves. Get up and walk your ass back to the western section this instant, I ordered, taking a few slow, careful steps towards him. Again, no response. The quivering of his shoulders grew stronger. The cowboy slowly stood up, his neck still bent backwards so he could keep looking at me. It was a grotesque sight. Finally, he turned around, cackling loudly. He straightened his hat and proceeded towards me, holding out his hand. I stared at him, hesitant to take it, but eventually relented. His palm felt cold and clammy. His laughter had faded and he was now regarding me with a strange, void smirk on his face. He didn't let go of my hand. When I tried to pull it away from him, his grip strengthened. I could feel my heart beating faster and faster in my chest. The cowboy was simply standing there, holding my hand and grinning at me with his black teeth. A wave of relief washed over me when he let go of my hand. He then reached up to his collar and began unbuttoning his shirt. I quickly took a few steps backwards, raising my hands. To my surprise, he actually listened this time. He stopped and instead peeled back one side of his shirt, allowing me to see part of his upper body. There were 3 bullet holes in his chest. The skin around them was frayed and the flesh in the holes themselves gray and dark. It looked rotten. I gagged slightly and turned my head. The man dashed forward and grabbed the cowboy by the collar, pulling him away from me. Here I am, turning my back to you for one damn second and next thing I know, you're off to harass the new employee, he grunted as he flung him aside. The cowboy quickly regained his footing and looked up at his attacker with narrowed, hateful eyes. "I don't think he cares what it is he does, as long as it gets on my nerves," he said, side-glancing at the pretender who was begrudgingly walking alongside him. The Sugar Plum Fairy is one of the monsters from the candy-themed section. Of course, it's directed mainly at really small children. Not unlike the cowboy, the fairy does not cause a lot of trouble most of the time, except for when she does, she makes a way bigger mess. She has the general appearance of a very short, young woman in a tutu. She wears a bunch of cute accessoires in her hair that look like candy. She spends all day ballet dancing on a small stage in the candy section. She never stops moving. But every night when the park closes down and the monsters are brought into their overnight shelters, she goes absolutely berserk. That one night, I had just taken Mr. Scratch to his cage. Maxine radioed for me to come over. Most of the other actors had not quite finished up their work yet and were still busy taking care of their own assigned pretenders, so I had to go and help her catch the fairy. I made my way over to the candy section where Maxine was waiting for me. She had already changed out of her costume and into her normal everyday clothes. She hurriedly explained to me that the Sugar Plum Fairy had run off when she had entered the stage to take her back to the small trailer she spends the night in and was now roaming this part of the park. We split up to go look for her, and I admit I was more than just a little nervous. So I went down to the booths to look for her. It wasn't the first time I had encountered her, so I knew what to expect, but when I found her sitting on the roof of one of the closed food stands facing me, I nearly got a heart attack. After I had caught my breath again, I carefully continued to approach her. I breathed a sigh of relief when she placed her tiny hand in mine. Moments later, she landed gracefully on the ground on her tiptoes. No idea how she does that, by the way. She let go of my hand and for a moment, we just looked at each other, smiling. I continued to back away, the Sugar Plum Fairy slowly and menacingly proceeding towards me on her tiptoes. I screamed for Maxine to help me, knowing full well it was useless. By the time she'd find me, the monster would have probably already managed to take a good chunk out of my arm or something. Her tiny hands pushed me to the ground with a strength betraying her small, delicate frame. I felt her step on my stomach, painfully pushing the tip of her foot into my soft flesh. Then, all of a sudden, she pulled back. He just took her by the arm and calmly walked off with her. I pushed myself off the ground and followed them. He led her to her trailer, opened the door and helped her climb inside before closing the latches and locking her in. I watched in disbelief as he tipped his hat at me before wandering off to the Wild West section. I thought I could hear Mitchell shout something along the lines of, "Where the hell were you?" in the distance. All in all, I think the Sugar Plum Fairy might be the one that creeps me out the most. The cowboy is a close second, but just because he's so unpredictable. Then again, there's so many of them to choose from and each pretender just hits another nerve with me, so I really can't tell for sure. Part 5, Diva and Pianist. Part 8, Mr. Scratch. Part 11, Weird Stuff on Halloween. Part 13, Restroom. Part 15, 20 Questions. Part 18, Fired.
Whew, telling gave me chills. But hey, we're just getting started. The next one's sharper. You'll see.
Why Not, by Ease Misery. I pounded my tiny fists against the doors. I cried, I peed. I put my eye against the keyhole and watched as they went about their business, sans me. Finally, I started to scream. Why? Why are you doing this? They did this for many years. There was never any warning. I would be eating breakfast, anticipating the walk to school, when suddenly one of them would grab me by the arm and haul me into the cupboard. I fought at first, but it was pointless. They were bigger than me. My resistance did nothing. As I grew older, it became more and more uncomfortable in the small cupboard. The smell of cleaning supplies would make me lightheaded. The mold and everyday decay would stick to my clothes and hair. It was an odd prison. Dark, but quiet. The only light came in through the keyhole, which I watched like a sentry. I hid in every space I could fit, as long as it had a hole to see out of. I stopped going to school. I wore clothing that covered me up completely except for my eyes. I wanted to see, not be seen. As usual, my family did not notice. I was a prop to walk around. My mother inspected the gun for a moment before pointing it at my father. Her shot found its mark in his forehead. He fell back like a bowling pin. I let out a small yelp. She looked up at me, blank-faced. Quietly, I slipped out of the shelf and stood in front of her, shaking. "Why did you shoot him?" I asked, choking back fear. Her words came as no surprise to me. "Why not?" She held the gun out, dangling it from her pointer finger. Terrified, I held up my hands and she dropped it onto my open palms. "I can't," I whispered. As I opened the front door, I heard noises from the bedroom. It was my parents, rising from their deathbeds. But I couldn't look back, even if their voices begged me to return. They said they were finally free. They would love me now. But I shut the door to their wails. This would be a new chapter for me. A brand new life. Because, why not?
That last one tasted like fear and poor decisions. Let's see what the next bite serves. Hope you're hungry.
I was hired to be a living exhibit in a billionaire's private collection, by Christian Wallace. Mr. Brinshaw smiled like an amused father. I'd expected him to be some trust fund creep after reading about the job, with slicked back hair the color of straw and teeth too big for his gums. But when I met him, I was surprised to see that he was quiet and dignified, even a little affectionate. Somehow, he was all the scarier for it. "The artist was very close to my heart," he said. "I was his patron, but it can be hard for people to get what they want, especially money. I thought I was saving him. He died before the millennium, twisted all out of shape on some hospital bed, begging for more drugs." "Don't be," he replied. He wrote some remarkable poetry. Revolutionary stuff that would have introduced us to a new age of spiritualism if he hadn't burned most of it. He also gave me this painting, and in doing so, he led me to you. "Oh, we have all those types here already. The educated and the qualified," he said. "But it's not always about qualifications, or even talent. Sometimes I simply like to give people a chance at getting what they want." The old man smiled again, and this time it wasn't so fatherly. We were expected to wake at 5 a.m. and spend the day preparing. Costume fittings. Practice runs. More costume fittings. More practice runs. Hours and hours spent sitting still. Standing still. Posing. Smiling. Crying. Purring. Roaring. Growling. I was sexy, vulnerable, dignified, angry, fierce, quiet, cold, warm, hot. By the end of the first day, just as the sun began to set on the shores of the private island, I was exhausted and ready to collapse. There were 13 of us set in various places around a central podium. A young woman, easily 6 feet 3 inches with the frame of a Victorian ghost, was then guided to her place at the focus of the piece. She tried not to smile as she climbed the steps, but her eyes alighted on me for the briefest of moments, and I felt her smug superiority overwhelm me. I began to shake, to flush hot with sweat and embarrassment, but before I had time to compose myself, the room suddenly burst into frantic alarm and every black-shirt assistant, choreographer, and costume designer fled into the distant corners of the room where they disappeared behind secret doors. Only the artist remained, and he made some final adjustments before the guests arrived. "Catherine," he said, "and God if I haven't heard that exact same phrasing of my voice 1,000 times before. Catherine darling, can you just scooch down, just a little?" "Brilliant," the artist said and clapped his hands. And then the guests poured in. Ilana floated past me, a full head taller than I, not even looking down as she hurried on towards the adoring artist. Other dancers broke away from their conversations and surged out to greet her, and a timid-looking man who I knew to be a guest lingered awkwardly, waiting to make her acquaintance. His movies dominated the box office every year, but he fidgeted nervously like a chubby teenager at Comic-Con. She was painted silver, only on her it looked platinum. The rest of us were like shabby copper figurines in comparison. This was our first nude show, and I didn't feel like sticking around with all the others who seemed so comfortable in their own skin, so I hurried from the stage and made my way to one of the corner exits. "Oh Ilana." I turned to catch Mr. Brinshaw, flanked by the lanky Jensen. He shuffled up to the precious metal debutante and took one of her hands into his. His eyes looked at her with pure admiration, like she was his favorite daughter and mistress rolled into one. Whatever he said to her, I couldn't make it out, but it looked like a secret shared between two lovers. It hurt to see him talk to her like that. It was childish and stupid of me. I knew it even then. But it still hurt like hell. I looked down at my legs and saw the paint flaking away and I felt so irritated that it would do that for me but none of the others. I got ready to hurry back to the changing rooms only for my attention to be caught by Mr. Brisenshaw. He was talking and laughing, and he had swept his eyes across the crowd in a way that I mistook for his turning in my direction. Only his eyes didn't stop to linger, not even for a second. He simply did not see me. It was Jensen, smiling awkwardly as he sat beside me on the step where I smoked. We were behind one of the many kitchens that opened onto a gravel-filled bit of yard. Big houses, really big houses, I knew they often had little openings like this. It let natural light fill rooms deep in the center of the building. A lot of the models have been gagging to meet the guests outside of the performance. Mr. Brinshaw finally relented, he added. "For Ilana?" I asked. Jensen smirked. I think he was trying to be sympathetic, but it didn't seem that way. "Do I stand out that badly?" He handed me a small card, my name written on one side in flourishing cursive. / That night I could not sleep, so I decided to take my restlessness and exercise it a little with a walk around the house. Most of it was open to us, and in one of our first meetings Mr. Brinshaw had encouraged us to roam the halls and galleries so that we could take inspiration from his private collection. Most of it was a little mundane, obscure blocks of color and black and white photographs of naked women alongside ugly caricatures and unsubtle statements on all kinds of isms. Any one of the pieces would be worth millions to the right person, but none of it spoke to me. Or at least, most of it didn't. Sure, a lot of it was rote, exactly the kind of thing you'd expect to find hanging on the walls of someone with too much money. But every now and again I'd find myself stopping at a painting with a cheap frame, hanging awkwardly over a bathroom door or tucked away in one of the endless hallways, and it would seize my attention. I walked until just after midnight, honing on these Baroque paintings that had been so clearly and deliberately understated. Slowly, I came to realize that they formed a kind of secret exhibition, one that threaded between all the others. The paintings were diverse in their content, but all possessed a singular sense of taste that I knew must belong to the collector. If he'd bought the other paintings out of some pretentious need to impress, he'd at least bought these ones out of a genuine interest. He liked them. "No," I answered. "Do you?" She shook her head. Probably just the stress. Always being in the center of it all, I said. She relaxed a little and reached out to take my hand before hurrying along with me in tow. She reminded me of a little kid relieved to find out they're not lost and alone, and I felt some trepidation as her footfalls slowed and we came to a small door set at the end of a very long dead end. "There's someone in there," she mouthed silently. And what of me? I wondered. What of my clumsy feet? Or the creaking of my bones or tensing of my muscles? Could they hear me? I looked back the way we came. We were deep in the spider's lair, so to speak, and I made to uncouple from the wall and begin the slow walk back. Ilana did the same, only both of us were stopped in our tracks when a single white card slid out from beneath the door. Ilana was frozen by the sight, her eyes going so wide and her skin so pale she looked like a porcelain doll. I realized I was going to have to be the one to pick the card up. As soon as I had the card in hand I stood up and ran. She nodded in agreement. These displays were agonizingly slow and boring, but I suppose that was the point. A living painting was how Jensen had described it, although it wasn't quite that at all. The fact we were alive was in itself part of the brush strokes that rendered the image whole. Us being there, uncomfortable and tired and exhausted with pins and needles prickling up our arms and legs, that was what it was really about. At least until I reached my bed and pulled back the bed covers to reveal a bloodied cigar cutter. Beside it lay a tiny little cone of pink meat and I realized with great horror that it was the tip of someone's tongue. Whoever had left it had included a note. "You looked so good tonight." It read. "The competition should watch out." To my right, one of the other performers began to shiver. I could see him struggling to keep it together, his chattering teeth were the loudest thing in that room. But the audience had become riveted by our struggles. The lazy procession of fur-clad women and old men with pipes slowed to a crawl, and as one they turned to face us, all faces on the quivering young man whose skin was turning blue. Eventually he gave up, a cry of frustration rang out and he began to walk away only for his body to give up. He too collapsed, his head coming scarily close to the hard edge of the stage as he fell over. In my mind, I knew that meant there were 10 of us left, and I swore that the room was still getting colder. Some of the others made minor adjustments, perhaps thinking the same thing I was. This was an exhibit on endurance, or pain, or some similar thing, they just hadn't told us. Still, it was all part of the show. I couldn't for the life of me figure out why anyone would think of this, but I found myself wondering what it would mean to be the last one standing. To be the only person up there. Standing and displaying it all, perhaps not to be admired, not by everyone surely. But at the very least to be acknowledged. To be seen. I like to think we all realized this at the same time. It would be another 2 hours before anyone else fell. I bet that was down to the sudden spur of determination inspired by the first two. I knew the competition had worked wonders for my endurance, and it continued to do so even as another one, then two, and then 3 people collapsed or ran off sobbing unable to bear another second of the freezing cold. I was close to giving up when I felt a flush of hot air. It was so deliriously delightful that I thought it was the onset of hypothermia, but that didn't explain the smell. God, it was awful. A stomach-churning mixture of meat and rotten fruit that made me think of buzzing flies and bloated roadkill. But it was warm, it was so warm that I found the feeling returning to my arms, and then my hands and feet, until even my toes and fingers were tingling with heat. An awkward glance at the others showed them shivering, and I watched as another fell into a puddle of tears and cried for help. But I was warm, even a little comfortable. The fewer of us there were, the more eyes I felt lingering on me. They were impressed, I could tell. Billionaires and oligarchs who ruled the world, and there they were getting to see what I was made of. Far from what I'd first imagined, this wasn't some display of nubile delicacy. They had come here to see some metal, and I knew I had it in me to be the last one up there. For the first time ever, the audience applauded one of our performances, and I knew with certainty it wasn't for anyone but me. / You know what happened to Alana, don't you? No, I shook my head and turned back to the painting. It showed a teenage boy floating nude in a void, his mouth open so wide the skin began to tear, his head wrenched back like a baby bird feeding. From above, liquid gold poured down into his mouth, flowing over his lips and over his face and shoulders in shimmering rivulets. Something about the brush strokes made the gold look incredibly three-dimensional, like you could reach out and interrupt the flow with the tip of your finger. Why not? I don't know, he said. I think you know something I don't. You haven't fit in since day one. I asked a friend to look you up, and the last time you did any professional work was in 2008. Since then it's been, what? Day jobs? Retail? It's hard for a dancer to be seen, I said. The going is good for you now, but it won't last. You know how many people graduate from a contemporary dance school and go on to have nice long successful careers? It's hard, and it only gets harder. So, what do you want me to say? I want to know the truth, he said. I want to know why someone like you is up there, taking center stage after a contrived series of bullshit just to, what? Keep us eager. Make us that little bit extra insecure. What's in there? He asked. What the fuck? You know what happened to Alana, don't you? It was a young man speaking to me, one of the performers. I'm sure he'd told me his name early on. We'd probably even flirted. But I had been thoroughly absorbed by the painting in front of me. Blinking away the urge to giggle or run, I turned back to him. He looked oddly familiar. / Good God! I cried. What are you doing in there? Shush, he hissed. I think the others are gone. Don't be silly, I grumbled. Aren't we doing a show today? You should, I said. Didn't you come here to be part of something special? What was that? She snapped, her head whipping from side to side. It moved again, and I realized it was the wall behind her. I decided to calm her, but when I reached out, my hand touched something cold and hard, like a sheet of glass. Tunk! My finger probed the surface with confusion while the woman frantically pulled the tiny space apart looking for whatever had moved. When the wall shifted again, it finally dawned on her what was happening. Let me out, she screamed and went to shove me aside, but like me, her hands couldn't get past that invisible wall. What? She stammered. What the fuck? Her words were cut off when the wall behind her touched her back. All accusations fell away as she was pushed up against the glass and the pressure started to build. Desperately her hands probed the invisible wall, and I noticed that her fingertips peeked out around the edges. I touched it myself and felt that the gap was no more than a millimeter wide. I said. Art can be transformative, I said, reaching down to stroke her. From above a hot gust of wind blew across me, stinking hard of rot and meat. I could tell that he agreed. It moaned. I stepped back and looked at the others. It occurred to me there would be another show soon, and I decided to go see if anyone was ever going to come get me. At this stage, they really couldn't afford to forget. The whole thing was riding on my shoulders. I found him in his bedroom. It was a gorgeous four-poster frame made of stunning hardwood oak, the color so rich it looked almost like opal. His companions were very attractive as well. No one could ever say Mr. Brinshaw had bad taste. I just wish I hadn't stepped in him when first entering the room. But the light was off, and he was just everywhere. The women were also in a bit of a state. Still, the room was full of giggles and cheers, and I just had to accept that Mr. Brinshaw was occupied for the time being. I left and went looking for Jensen. He was hanging in the atrium, his wrists clearly slit using a letter opener that lay on the floor. He had written a note that was kept in his pocket, and I took it just knowing it had been meant for me. It was pretty hard to read, what with the bloody thumbprints and the messy handwriting, but I managed to make some of it out. In our wildest dreams did we expect this to happen. I won't lie to you and say that we had the best of intentions. But never this, Catherine. By now you must be the last one left and surely wondering what all of this was about. The summoning. Me, I grumbled. This was always about me. I gave Jensen a playful little shove that sent him swinging. / I like you. I see you. The card landed in my lap. The word sent a warm fuzzy feeling rushing up my stomach and I reached out and held it close to my chest. I have enjoyed my time here. Me too. A knife fell from the darkness above and landed beside me blade first. It stuck in the wooden floor and the handle quivered from side to side. Without thinking I grabbed it and looked down at my legs. In the distance I could hear a helicopter. / I refused to go into detail for them. It was a ridiculous request to tell them what happened, and it didn't matter how many angry people asked. Maybe if they'd appreciated the exhibit, but I could tell they were disgusted by the collection. I had inspired an unrivaled creativity in him, and he had run rampant making and twisting and reshaping, and some of the things they found sobbing in that house were truly beautiful. A few even slipped away into the ocean, but I haven't told. They put me in this place and he's gone. Well, sometimes I feel that breath on my shoulders. He keeps an eye on me when he can, I'm sure of it. Now they don't let me out of the room, but the staff do always give me what I want. A laptop, the Wi-Fi password, cigarettes, even some art supplies. They must think I'm dangerous and don't want to get on my bad side. Such a silly thing to think. It wasn't me who blinded that old man. He did it to himself. But I thought he should know. And you should too.
Still here? Aw, look at you. Brave little meatbag. Too late to back down now. Next story's already watching.
My wife thinks I should win a Nobel, by Mr. Frontenac. This is a brief story, but I suppose I should back up. Brain surgeons aren't looking any younger. I'm vain. Perhaps a better word is shallow. Beauty to me has always been skin deep, and the moral of the ugly duckling was that he wasn't ugly forever. Thank God. Couldn't you have done more? It happens. She asked why and I should have lied. Okay, it wasn't that simple. I wanted some of her money. But just enough to live on. I wasn't going to bleed her dry. She had plenty of the stuff and hardly ever spent it. One night when I was watching TV, she had snuck up behind me. It wasn't intentional, our home was one of those suburban monstrosities with thick carpets that swallowed sound. Richard. We should talk, she held up a fifth of whiskey and wiggled it. About us. Sure, babe. Right. I didn't care. I was salivating already. Eyes on that beautiful, amber bottle. After just one glass things got hazy. But I wasn't worried, Nadia wasn't the poisoning type. She was far smarter than that, but before we'd even dented the bottle the world went black. / I woke in some kind of coma. I couldn't feel anything. I couldn't hear anything. But there wasn't even my relentless tinnitus ring, accumulated from a youth of Korn concerts. Is this the purgatory that coma patients feel? I began to panic but was even more disturbed when I couldn't feel my heartbeat. There was no surge of adrenaline in my gut. The little lights grew, and the dark was erased. The pinpoints, I realized, were pixels. I looked down and realized then that I couldn't blink. I couldn't close my eyes. I began looking around the screen frantically when more words flashed across the screen. There I was. Handsome in a brown suit. And Nadia was beautiful. Her cheeks youthful, burning with blush. Fed each other cake. There's one more I want to show you now. It's a time-lapse, she typed. One photo every 4 hours under 24-hour light. She pulled up a new tab. Hit play. In the video, outside under a floodlight, my severed head sat on a mound of mud. The frame switched, another 4 hours passed, and my skin peeled a little from my skull. Bugs and worms crawled out of the earth and into my eye sockets. My cheeks began to bloat and then blacken with swarms of flies. A few seconds later the flesh burst to reveal balls of maggots swarming beneath the skin. But it can't be. I'm watching a video. I can see the fucking buffer bar. There are no video players in hell. Right? The decomposition continued. The video played normally, and Nadia's feet appeared on camera. She squatted so she was in frame. She smiled. The cursor was back, blinking for several seconds on the screen before words began to appear. Isn't that funny? You thought I was getting old. Look at you, Richard. Time has already taken you back to the earth. Did she clone me? Make some kind of model of my head? The typing continued. Second thing is you'll have access to the internet. You're very special now, Richard. I'd like to keep you entertained. I'd like to keep you alive. But as incredible as you are, your appearance is disgusting. It's pathetic. You look like something beached waiting to be picked apart by gulls. Without eyelids they have a constant look of cartoonish surprise. I've always wondered if this procedure was possible. The typing stopped. She wanted me to think about that. And I have been for some time now, because she hasn't typed anything since. Every day is an existential crisis. Every day I try to find an identity. Take away our faces, our skin and our scars and we're all the same plain, gray matter.
You're still tuned to HorrorSlop. Frequency unknown. Stories endless. Let's spin the next nightmare.
My daughter was born on the night she died, by her creation. My daughter was curious. From a young age she posed an infinite amount of critical questions. Why do the clouds look angry before it rains? Why do people work all day if it makes them sad? How do you know you love mommy? Regardless of how many, I don't know, I tossed back at her. My daughter was creative, painting favorite song lyrics and beautiful images along her bedroom walls no matter how many times I painted over them. My daughter was trusting, placing her life in my hands in spite of the hundreds, perhaps thousands, of times I failed her. My daughter died on the night of her 15th birthday. I'm ashamed to admit that I almost ignored it, but I figured it might be Charlie requesting a ride home. She was a hell of a partier even at her young age, and I lacked the necessary rapport to steer her away from the precarious road she was already traveling down at 90 miles per hour, windows down, stereo blaring. Reckless, careless, but free, that was my Charlie. I peeled myself out of bed and made my way to the kitchen, knees and back aching. God, when did I get so old? as I rushed to reach the phone before the final ring. "There's a storm on the way, son. Check on Charlotte." "Dad?" I returned, incredulous, but the line had already disconnected. Sleep crusting my eyes and half convinced I must be dreaming, I followed the caller's instructions, pacing to my daughter's room and gently nudging the door open. The light was on. She always left the lights on, no matter how many damn times I told her I couldn't afford the electric bill. I stepped through the doorway to switch off the light when I finally caught sight of her, really saw her and the state she was in. Her eyes were open. Her body was still, no rhythmic rising and falling of her chest. I watched as my hand, still clinging to the phone yet somehow so disconnected from my own mind or body, dialed 911. I could only nod in response. He dashed into Charlie's room. I followed him. Another man, the head paramedic, perhaps, stopped me, blocking my path, blocking my way to Charlie. The man waved me off, clearly in too much of a time crunch to hear me out. I didn't feel particularly capable of speech anyway. "She's been dead for too long to resuscitate traditionally. There's something else we could try, something new and experimental, but we need your permission to do so." He bent over, reaching into a black duffel bag to pull out a plastic package. "I'm going to need an answer, sir," he directed, firmly. "I can assure you your daughter will not live unless we try this." "Yes," I wheezed. All air had left my lungs. When the safety, no, the life of your child is concerned, there really is no other answer. Immediately, the emergency team set into action, forming a horseshoe around her bed. The man in charge ripped through the plastic packaging to reveal a large needle partially filled with an opaque black fluid. The alarmingly long tip of the needle glinted in the yellow light from the single lamp illuminating the room, the one that Charlie never turned off. "Give her space," he barked, taking a few steps backwards himself. The rest of his team followed suit, leaving Charlie reclined on the bed. For 10 excruciatingly long seconds, nothing happened. I buried my face in my hands, unable to watch, the feeling of failure absolutely suffocating. My mind offered me refuge in pleasant memories once more, but Charlie needed me there. I could not leave again. And then, SSSSSSHLEPPPPP. The sound of ripping, wet and loud and nauseating, tore through the smothering silence that had fallen over the room. A screech of agony pierced the air as the skin of my Charlie's face burst to split down the center. The head of some unknown creature, capped with glistening white, burst forth. The figure continued to fight, struggling to release its body from within Charlie's skin, ligaments and tendons and vessels snapping loudly with each forceful movement. My head spinning, I steadied myself with both hands laid flat on my knees, my breaths coming heavy and unsatisfying. The rest of her flesh erupted soon after, tearing first along the middle of her torso, the gashes splintering and spreading down to her arms and legs. The strange figure, red and bloody and severe, finally emerged from its trappings to sit upright with a sickening squelch, glancing frantically around the room. "Dad," the figure squeaked, confusion and pain readily apparent in her voice, Charlie's voice. "What's going on?" I was assured that she would heal, though it would take time, rest, and care. They'd send a nurse to keep her safe and comfortable, but Charlie would have to stay hidden throughout the healing process for obvious reasons. I figured I needed to do something eventually, so I gently knocked before pressing her bedroom door open. She appeared to have healed very little, if at all, but it was hard to judge as she was entirely swathed in bandages save for her eyes and mouth. "Hey, Char," I called from the doorway, moving hesitantly across the room. She provided no response, rolling over in bed to look out the window. "Listen," I began, sighing. "I don't know what happened to you, Charlie, but, well, it must have been bad," I declared, kicking myself internally as the words fell from my mouth, stupid and misguided. It kills me to see you like this. To see you in pain. I can't stand to know that you've been hurt. I guess I just wanted to say, I'm sorry. You fucking idiot, a voice, Annie's voice, came from behind me. Annie laughed gently in disbelief. You don't know what to do, she chided softly, somehow still comforting through her criticism. She died. I don't know what happened to her either, but I do know she won't talk until she feels safe and heard. She's just a child. Be patient with her. // The next morning, I visited her room again. The visible muscles on her face tugged the corners of her mouth into a frown. I gingerly stepped across the room to perch on the edge of her bed. Tell me how you feel, Charlie. Help me understand. He was my friend. I trusted him. I've lost everything, she lamented, casting her eyes downward, impossibly white against the muscle surrounding them. I can't leave this house, I can't go to school, I can't see my friends, as if I ever had any in the first place. I feel so sad, and so weak, and so stupid. Charlie swallowed loudly before adding, but mostly, I feel so angry. Tell me more about that, I urged, turning to face her directly. I hung my head, afraid of what she'd say. The accusation hurt like a knife twisting in my chest, threatening to drive me mad. I hate you, Dad, she screeched, striking my shoulder with a closed fist. I hate you. I hate you. I hate you, she repeated, pummeling my side with each admission, flinching upon each impact, her bandages staining red with each blow. The repeated exertion exhausted her until she collapsed on my shoulder. Sadness overcame the force of her hatred as she began to cry. Not getting to know you as a little girl is my life's greatest regret, I choked, balling my hands into tight fists. Because once I came back, once you started to let me in, I'd never loved anyone until I got to know you. Your favorite color is red, not bright red, but deep, crimson, blood red. You love that horrible music, men screaming over harsh melodies, but I love it because it never fails to bring that smile to your face. You love to paint giant pictures across your bedroom wall. Your laugh is so abrupt, and so big that it just swells and fills the air, infecting me like a contagion that I'll never grow immune to. You are the strongest person I know, stronger than you know. You came out when you were 13, you socked a guy in the face for snapping your bra, you literally died and yet you're still here fighting. You're fucking invincible, Charlie, and we will get through this. The way I treated you after Mom died is unacceptable, inexcusable. I don't expect you to ever forgive me. The truth is, I missed out, you didn't. I was a horrible man. But you were perfect. You are the best thing to ever happen to me, and I will spend every day of the rest of my miserable life making up for the many years I was the worst thing to ever happen to you. The next morning, when Annie went to change Charlie's bandages, she found that a flimsy layer of skin had grown across her body. Paper thin and almost translucent, but there, nonetheless. // The police came soon after to take Charlie's statement. They'd been briefed on her strange condition, but they recoiled in horror upon the first sight of her fresh skin, barely concealing her underlying musculature as Annie rewrapped her bandages. Her smile was so immense I worried it would tear her freshly grown skin. Charlie spent the following weeks alone in her room, refusing any interruptions outside of her medical needs. Each morning when Annie rebandaged her, she was equal parts stunned and overjoyed to note how her skin had grown, thickened, still pale beyond belief, but stronger. // Slowly, normalcy trickled back into both of our lives. I returned to work. Char still wasn't ready for school, but she buried herself in her own studies, diving into famous works of art and creating her own She hurled cans of paint to cover the mural of her untimely death and repainted images of her, of me and of Annie, of us together, towering and colossal. Somehow, through the abject horror of the situation, we all became a family. Though Char's skin was still fragile, she was thriving in a way I never thought possible. That is, until he got out. He didn't end up serving his full time, was instead let out early on good behavior. The lead detective on her case delivered the poor news in person. There was nothing she could do. Wordlessly, Char pushed out her chair, stood up, and retreated to her room, slamming the door behind her. Things fell apart from there. Charlie's skin began to take on a new appearance, no longer fragile but hardened, rough, cracked, almost scaled over in some places. Jagged, sharp to the touch. Annie confided her worries in me. She was unsure of how her recovery would continue without the assurance of safety. She wasn't safe with him out there. He called the house last night. Charlie hadn't come out of her room for days, and I needed to guarantee her safety. I pulled my gun from my bedside drawer, my thoughts disorganized and unable to form a coherent plan. I didn't know how, or where, I would find him, but I would. And when I did, I would end him. For Charlie. I sat in my chair for several hours, alone in absolute silence, gun resting in my lap as I hardened myself emotionally for the task at hand. I expected the right moment to appear to me. It didn't. I decided to go anyway. I stood up and moved across the room, down the hallway towards the front door. The door swung open. I jumped back in surprise. "Daddy, I killed him," she sobbed into my chest, staining my shirt with her tears and his blood. "I killed him, I killed him, I killed him," she moaned repeatedly.
Still with us? Good. That last one was just the warm-up. Let's go deeper.
"Hey dude," I said. "Are you seeing this?" The next day, I returned to school, only to be called into an assembly with the entire student and staff population. The principal came out to break the news to us. Ms. Coleman had committed suicide the previous night. It wasn't until later, when I heard that the cause of death was a gunshot to the head, did I really start to panic. We were sent home for the rest of the day and I walked out of school with a cold, sick feeling in my stomach. "What is it?" he asked. He rubbed his hand over the stain as if it wasn't there. I just kept gawking in terror. "Maybe we should call a doctor," my mom said. "How about we just let you get a good night's rest, buddy," Dad told me reassuringly. I didn't sleep the entire night. When morning finally came, I begged Dad not to go to work, but of course he still went. Mom booked an appointment with our doctor before heading off to work also. I stayed home from school, and between fits of sweaty anxiety, I would call Dad's cell phone constantly to check in on him. The day crawled by and eventually Mom arrived in the door. "Dad must be working late," she said. I immediately called his cell, with no answer. A little while later, from the kitchen, I heard Mom take a phone call. Before she'd even said hello, my blood was already running cold and I was already crying. It was a freak accident. He was working on a car at the garage when something went wrong. The car had collapsed and crushed him. The following days and the funeral were like a nightmarish fever dream. Everything went by in slow motion. I felt limp and numb. "Please stop this," Mom asked, crying. "You're just confused." "Please stop," she begged. This was last night. As I write this, the stain is still there. I'm not sure what's gonna happen next, but I've made arrangements for my aunt to come take care of my mom once I'm gone. In any case, I write this account in the hopes that it may help some of you out there. If you begin to see stains on people that no one else can, warn them before it's too late.
Need a break? Too bad. These stories don't wait, and neither do we. Next one's worse, in the best way.
I can freeze time. I'm sorry, I think I've unleashed something, like Fauna Vermore. Ever since I was little, I could always do it. The first time I remember doing it, I think I was 3. My mom literally caught me with my hand in the cookie jar. I saw her marching up, with her scary, angry mom face, and suddenly, I stopped everything. Mom stood there, still with her angry face, mid-stride and with her mouth open terrifyingly, as she'd been right in the middle of yelling something at me. Nothing moved, there was no sound other than the ringing in my ears, and I just knew, I'd stopped it all. I felt it. I just sort of flexed something in my mind, and time just stops. Once I was sure I was safe, I quickly scarfed down my cookie and swallowed it up, before putting on my most innocent face and letting time resume. You know, I told you I know. That's sort of how I used it as I grew up. I learned pretty quickly that not everyone could stop the clock like I could. I also learned there are limits. When time is frozen, it's truly frozen. I can move about freely in a frozen world, but I can't move anything. People, objects, insects in flight, all of them are frozen in exactly the same spot as before, and no amount of force I exert can move them. I learned to be careful running around outside when I ran right into a bumblebee, and knocked the wind right out of myself as it completely halted my excited sprinting. The next thing I learned was to wear thick shoes. When grass can't be moved, it becomes a field of spikes. I'm pretty sure I could stab myself with it if I tried hard enough. With a thick pair of shoes, I could carefully cross over well-manicured lawn. The more unruly ones I stayed away from. There are exceptions, sort of, like the cookie. I was holding it when I first stopped time, so I was able to carry it with me and eat. My own clothes move with me too. If I'd tried to grab another cookie, they'd have been like statues, stuck to wherever they were. Other people's clothes are like that too, so I can't go undressing people while time is frozen, which I'm happy for in hindsight, but we'll talk about how bad I was as a teenager in a bit. For some reason, bringing objects into frozen time doesn't apply to people I'm touching. I can bring a cookie, but another person I'm touching just freezes up like everything else. I accidentally got my hand caught in the folds of my mother's skirt once because I froze time and it held me like a vice. That's the first rule. Nothing can be moved. The second rule is, in order for time to start back up, I had to be pretty damn close to where I was when I first froze time, otherwise, it feels like, it's hard to explain. You know those video glitches on streaming services, where it hiccups and stops for a few seconds, but then it rushes to catch up and the last few seconds of footage sort of speed by? It feels like that in my brain. Like I'm desperately trying to push forward and catch up in my brain, but I literally can't until I'm back close to where I was when I started. I suppose I could also say it was like a skipping record, but I don't know how many people would get that these days. I don't have to be in the exact same position as I was at first, thankfully, just close. My mom says I had a tendency to dash away, and that I was, weirdly, fast at times. So other people might slightly notice some odd visuals as I stop and start, but since I'm close to my original spot, it's nothing they can't explain. Growing up with this ability, it was strange. I was a weird introvert already, and when you can stop time like a deity, you sort of develop a complex and further isolate yourself. I wasn't completely without friends, mind you. High school was hard. Puberty hit me like a freight train. Despite my parents being wonderful people who taught me about boundaries, respect, and consent, I made a conscious decision to ignore a lot of that in high school. You can think of me as an abuser, a deviant, a pervert, that's fine, I deserve it, I totally was. I consciously chose to find my way into women's spaces, so I could ogle them while they were vulnerable. Locker rooms, bathrooms, my favorite was the changing rooms at the local pool. I can't open doors when time is frozen, but the showers at the pool were only covered by curtains. All I had to do was freeze time, slip in, and crawl under, and I could stare to my heart's content. For 2 years I acted like a cretin, but thought of myself as a god. At some point, it got old though. For starters, porn was way less work. For another, none of it was a real relationship, which was the other thing I desperately craved. I'd just as soon not mention any of my deviant behavior, but the thing is, I have to. I think that was the first time I saw it. One time, I got unreasonably angry at the most popular girl in school. Head of the volleyball team and queen of our high school. She was pretty and she knew it. Lots of people hated her for it. She could be a little haughty at times, and I heard she could be really cruel to other girls, but looking back, I'm not sure where the vitriol came from. She made a harmless comment in class to something I'd suggested that wasn't really an insult, but I interpreted it as such anyway. I resolved to see her naked. In my mind it was what she owed me for insulting me. I wanted to punish her for my own gratification. My fiancé believes that I can freeze time now, and here's how. We devised a test we could do. She wrote things onto a post-it note, and placed it face down on a glass table while keeping her eyes on me sitting across the room. She'd tell me she was ready, and I would freeze time, crawl under the table, and read what she wrote, before returning to my seat, unfreezing time, and reciting what she'd written. She tried to talk me into other experiments, but I declined, and she respected that. I just wanted to live my life. So we did. That brings us to now. I walked past my solitaire playing friend, and when I glanced at his computer screen, I noticed something off. It was turned off. At the time I kind of just assumed I'd mixed up coworkers. So I sort of ignored it. When I got back to the boss's office, I swore his coffee mug was turned in a different direction. When I'd frozen time before, I could read the writing on his coffee mug. No one cares. Work harder, yeah, he's that kind of jerk. Now, from that same position, all I saw was the black of the other side. This guy always keeps his mug face out to remind his underpaid underlings that they should be doing more for him, and also, I freaking saw the writing when I first froze this moment. Why couldn't I see it now? I couldn't move the cup or anything, so what else could I do? I resumed time and let the idiot keep yelling at me. He made sure to turn his cup to tell me to work harder as I left the office. Out of curiosity, I checked in with my solitaire friend. His computer had crashed. Poor guy lost a really important report he was working on. He had to redo it. Not sure why he was playing solitaire. But last week, something happened that's never happened before. I froze time so I could wander around outside. The frozen town proper is just sort of fascinating. I was strolling along, and all of a sudden, there it was. A freaking noise. There was never any noise before. Even my own feet made no sound as I walked about with time frozen. But I heard it clear as day. Finally I made it back to my original spot. I stood there panting, trying to start time back up, so I wouldn't feel so alone. But for a brief moment, I couldn't move it. I glanced around, with a sense of growing dread. That's when I saw something else move around the frozen cityscape. It was only a shadow. Just a flicker of some dark shape. It wasn't human. Its limbs were long, its head almost looked like an egg, and there were white empty half-circles where eyes ought to be. Just white voids. It was the same shadow from the wall of the showers all those years ago. Somehow I knew it. It wasn't frozen this time. Our eyes met, then everything started moving and the shadow vanished. I started screaming right in the middle of the sidewalk. I froze time and ran to her. By some miracle she hadn't closed the door as she dressed herself after her shower, so I was able to run right into the room. There she was. She'd dropped her towel, and was recoiling in terror. She stood there frozen, reeling away, about to fall backwards. I followed her gaze. There was the egghead shadow. It wasn't a shadow anymore. It stood there in the room. A living shadowy mass in a horrifically humanoid shape. Then it turned and looked at me with its empty white voids. It wasn't frozen. The next thing I knew, I couldn't move. I was as frozen as my fiancé, but I was still aware. I could only watch helplessly as its shadowy limbs shuddered to life, and it skulked towards her. It walked behind her, out of my sight. I heard it rummaging around. A minute later I could move again. Maybe it's all coincidence, but I don't think so. I'm not sure what this thing is, or where it came from, but it has control over time. More than I do even. And it seems to enjoy killing. I worry that I'm the one who called it here somehow. As far as I know, it's still out there. I'm going after it. I have to try and stop it. It might come back for the woman I love. It's more powerful than me, but maybe I just haven't figured out all I can do. I'm sorry, Delilah. I hope I'll be back soon.
Something's still listening, and it wants more. Next story. Just don't say its name.
I'm a voice actor, and was hired to read several emergency broadcasts. I don't think they were fake, by Max Voynich. No matter who is at the door, do not let them in. Backslash 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 backslash. And so, I stopped acting for a long time. I didn't go outside much. I must have read hundreds of books, but all of the girls in them were beautiful, even when they weren't supposed to know that they were. I watched a lot of TV, and preferred animated shows. I felt if they weren't real, then I was less conscious of the difference between us, and I wasn't so conscious about what had happened to my face. I felt real again, as if what my accident had robbed from me, I had reclaimed. I had colleagues, a network of people who trusted and respected me. It was only a few days ago that I received a small notification on one of the freelance sites I used. A standard username, and a fairly standard request, although the sum of money was way larger than I was used to. I took a screenshot and sent it to a voice actor friend of mine. It was an ad in the local section of one of these websites, that the poster had sent directly to me. My friend's response was encouraging. They said that often some of the larger studios will trawl freelance sites when asked to look for new talent. The end introducing credit is growing increasingly fashionable, and often those who are trawling will offer what they believe to be industry rates, not realizing that their figure is actually way higher than the reality. Hi backslash, my name backslash. Best. Hi. Backslash. Character notes not applicable. Rate specified includes petrol. I live in a small town, with a relatively small population. However, it's a well-known fact that in the Scottish Highlands surrounding my town there are dozens and dozens of military bases. These range from the official, where training exercises are run and truckloads of troops will stop off at the local pub for a drink, to the unofficial, plots of land that don't appear on satellite images, and reports of strange activity that slowly filters through the gossip mill. It looked like the location was fairly close to one of these bases, down a road I'd driven a few times. The road itself was long and winding. It cut into a shallow valley, and was filled with so many twists and turns that it had earned a place for itself in local mythology. There were always accidents when there was frost, and the locals managed to conjure up all sorts of reasons for these. I thought it was fairly evident that frost and hairpin turns don't make for easy driving, but I'd heard everything from aliens to ghosts trapped in the valley. And so, I agreed to the job. I spent the morning before practicing vocal warm-ups and working out my route there. The drive there was uneventful. Thankfully I'd downloaded the map and printed it off, as reception soon grew faulty. I went up a slow incline, and then down into the valley. I could just make out a white dot in the distance, and as I grew closer I realized that it was some sort of cottage. The man who opened the door wasn't quite what I'd expected. Something about him seemed familiar, as if I'd met him before, and when he shook my hand I caught a twang in his voice that I half recognized. But, this was probably mistaken. He stank of expensive cologne sprayed liberally, and wore sunglasses despite the overcast sky. He told me that they were excited to have me here, that they couldn't wait for me to sink my teeth into what they had planned, using the phrase, role of a lifetime. He gave a nod to the receptionist, who was typing away at her computer, as we walked past, although she didn't look up. He took me down into the basement, which had been kitted out with bright LED lights and gray soundproofing foam, where he handed me a set of legal documents. He mentioned something about finding a colleague and left the room. I read the first few lines, and the last, and the thickness of the set of papers I'd been handed indicated to me that even they didn't expect me to read it all. Nothing in the document seemed out of the blue, and I signed where indicated. It took me a moment to get my bearings, and I noticed that the basement of this building seemed bigger than I'd initially thought. The small room I was in was connected to a door that seemed to be the recording booth, and 3 other doorways. 2 were shut, and through the one that was open I could just make out a long corridor. A woman's voice came on, over the intercom. "Thank you so much for coming. In front of you is a short script. We'll only be reading this today." I looked back up, confused. I could hear a faint buzzing coming from somewhere outside the room. Is this it? Are there any character notes, any cues I should be aware of? I assumed the stay calm was some sort of stage direction, but I couldn't be sure. I did feel myself starting to panic slightly, and I thought about how little I knew about where I was. I didn't tell anyone where I'd be, because I had no one to tell. It made me a little uncomfortable, if I'm honest. Those who've listened to any of Charles Manson's speeches after he was arrested, or read some sort of lunatic's manifesto will know how unnerving genuine madness really is, and this felt something like that. That'll be all for today. You'll be escorted from the premises now. Same time tomorrow. Escorted from the premises? I frowned. That wasn't something you'd say to an actor, and definitely not one who you'd picked up from a local ad online. I heard the sound of a door open, and the clip-clip of heels down the corridor. Realizing this might be the woman, I dashed to the door and opened it. Unfortunately, she was already a long way down the corridor opposite, and moving quickly. Regardless of how weird the experience was, I didn't want to embarrass myself by dashing down after her, and even then, what would I say? Would I tell her that the script had made me uncomfortable? That the term escorted from the premises seems too strong? It all seemed ridiculous, and instead I just watched her walk away. I was a little disappointed with her silhouette, if I'm honest. The disembodied voice had meant I'd expected her to look a whole lot wilder, and I was disappointed with the fact that from behind she seemed to look perfectly normal. She was about my height, and had dark hair. The same way that you expect celebrities to be taller, I expected her to have an impossible hourglass figure and a sheer black bob, but, no, she seemed to be just like me. I sat in my car for a while thinking, without turning the engine on, listening to the arrhythmic sound of rain beginning to fall, the tap-tap-tap growing harder and more regular as my windshield became covered in tiny rivulets. What had made me so uncomfortable slowly dawned on me: the whole place had felt fake. Like a film set, or an empty stage, it wasn't lived in. There was no wear and tear, and everything, from the chair I sat on to the door I had come in through, had seemed brand new and factory fresh, as if just moments before I'd arrived they'd been pulling the shrink wrap off. As I mulled this over, I drove slowly back up towards the town. The rain was falling heavily now, and I had to put the fog lights on to cut through the half-light of the evening. There was no one else for miles around, and the wild grass and shrubs of the highlands stretched on and on in every direction around me. Something, maybe thunder, boomed in the distance. I looked in my wing mirrors, a little frightened now, and made out nothing behind me. I'd have seen it if there was, at least that was what I told myself. I didn't want to go too much faster, and admit to myself that something was wrong, but I increased my speed slightly, and checked my wing mirrors more and more often. I checked my rearview mirror, and for a second I thought I could make out a pale flash amongst the gray shrubbery, like a body, someone, something, running across the grass and up the shallow valley, running towards me, and then it disappeared, as if it had thrown itself to the ground, and I couldn't help but floor the pedal and drive as fast as I could away, tires shrieking in the rain, drenched in sweat and clutching the steering wheel so tight the tips of my fingers tingled. My second visit was in 15 minutes' time. Shit. I'm not sure I even had time to think about last night's events as I rushed through my morning routine, brushing my teeth as I got dressed, blasting myself with deodorant, necking scalding coffee as I threw my phone charger in a bag. I drove as quick as I could, and in the light of a new day the landscape that had put me on edge last night seemed to have dissolved with the night. As I pulled into the cottage, I noticed a few figures in the distance. They were easy to spot as they were all wearing high-vis jackets, which stood out against the muted colors of the grass and mountains. I looked closer. They were wearing high-vis jackets, and carrying something big and... Again, there was something familiar in his voice. An accent I knew. But I had no time to puzzle it over as I was shepherded inside. The woman made me spend a while perfecting my tone of voice. Apparently I sounded too stressed. Perhaps it's because I was running late, and hadn't had time to do any of the vocal warm-ups I usually like to do before a job. Had no idea what this could be. I thought, perhaps, I was providing a voiceover for a viral marketing campaign, or for a top-secret portion of a popular show or movie series. But I knew in my heart that both of these options weren't true, and there was something just too strange about the whole thing. There was much less to read today, and instead the woman was focused on ensuring that my voice was consistently relaxed and calming. About an hour in there was a commotion outside. I heard several voices outside my door, and the sound of her heels clipping down the corridor quickly, as if she was in a rush to attend to something. With my heart in my mouth, I decided to move a little further into the corridor. Although the voices were faint now, I could still hear them just, and I knew that if they were to come back this way I'd be able to hear it. So, making sure not to make any noise, I started walking. I'd thought perhaps the underground section had been a studio, but as I walked further I realized that it was far, far bigger. The map in my head had 3 corridors that maybe had several rooms, for equipment and editing, but this was on another scale entirely. The corridor I was walking down had dozens of corridors branching off of it, and each of these corridors seemed to stretch out for hundreds of meters, intersected by other corridors that I could only assume stretched just as far if not further, their dirty cream wallpaper blanketed in sterile white light. The session took another hour or so to finish, take after excruciating take. It's beyond agonizing to be told for the 12th time that your voice isn't quite soothing enough, and rallying yourself to keep it soothing whilst under that much stress is tough. There was one phrase in particular they had me repeat over and over again, until they must have had about 100 takes. They buzzed me out the same as before, but this time I heard the woman's heels ascending the stairs, and as I exited I thought I'd catch sight of her, but instead I only saw her legs and torso. She turned at the sound of the door opening, to face me, her face obscured from view by the low ceiling above me. She stood this way, facing me but not seeing me, for a while, before continuing up the stairs. I followed her. I was done with this place, with their agonizing demands and strange architecture. I tried to catch the receptionist's eyes as I left, but she was typing away, focused on the screen in front of her. The evening was darker than yesterday's, and I realized that I'd been below ground for far longer than I'd anticipated. Again, when I sat in the car, I took a moment to think over the previous few hours. I thought about the long, seemingly endless web of corridors underground, and what the doors that punctuated them held. I thought about how new the cottage seemed, and the high-vis jackets in the distance. I thought about how the whole thing seemed like an empty stage, and the way the man who'd let me in seemed to be playing a part and how I couldn't see his eyes, and how the receptionist was typing even though her screen was black and... I shook the thought from my head. Right now, I needed to focus on getting home. The experience of the previous day still had me shaken, and as I drove I used the breathing exercises they'd taught me in therapy. I tried to exclusively focus on driving and breathing, and counted each breath in, and each breath out. For a while, it worked. The evening grew darker. Then there was the sound again. A low boom, close. The clouds seemed to be leaving the sky and rolling in off the lips of the valley. Like dry ice, slowly moving towards me. It was drizzling now, and my windscreen wipers started, occasionally moving back and forth with a quiet squeak. I checked the rearview mirror again, and, this time, I'm certain I saw something. Something pale moved at the edge of the fog. I saw it only for a second before it was covered by the mist and the dark. Then I saw it again, closer this time, moving unnaturally, taking jagged steps before throwing itself down onto the ground. I put my foot on the gas, and felt a lump form in my throat as the car stalled for a second, then started, the engine straining under my demands. I know what I saw. I've tried to think about what they could be, tricks of the light, animals seeming closer than they really were. But I know. Those shapes could have only been one thing. They were unmistakably bodies, human bodies. Whether or not they were people, I don't know, but the way they moved they could only have been one thing. Tommy's voice, his thick accent that I realized I'd heard earlier today, that had tried to mask itself but couldn't help giving itself away in the vowels. The accent I'd heard from the man who'd let me into the cottage. The man wearing sunglasses despite the overcast sky. The man wearing sunglasses to cover his milky eyes. The silence hung for a while, barely masked by the faint sounds of cars far away. Then, I began to hear it. It was a wet, rasping sound, like the sound of someone choking. It grew slowly louder, and closer, moving down the street and towards my building, towards me. I sat there, feeling sweat bead on my forehead, listening to the sound of what I realized then was breathing from outside my window. It stopped moving, that is, it stopped getting louder and closer, outside my flat. It was as if whatever it was stood outside my block of flats, staring up at the window, and waiting. I moved quickly, grabbing my head and heaving it to my bedroom door, blocking myself in. I spent the rest of the night sat in a corner opposite the door, back pressed against the wall, occasionally shifting my eyes to the curtain. I could just picture the pale form outside, gurgling and choking, never taking its eyes from my window. The breathing continued. I slipped in and out of sleep, half dozing. I dreamt of the seemingly endless tunnels below the cottage, of the pale shapes in the mist, and milky-eyed drunks outside my window. I was woken by something that changed everything, a voice on a tannoy, loud and filtered through static. Remnants from the Blitz, our town still had emergency broadcast systems in place, tested, still, once a year. Until I knew exactly where it was from. All citizens are to lock their doors and gather family and friends in one room. Do not let anyone out of your sight. Stay put. Help is coming. Do not under any circumstances leave your location. Do not trust voices from outside, no matter how familiar they sound. This is an emergency broadcast. Most importantly, no matter who is at the door, do not let them in. No matter who is at the door, do not let them in. /
Sleeping yet? Didn't think so. Next story's up. And yeah, it's worse. You're welcome.
My second penis comes at night, by Lewis. I shot awake at 12:42 a.m. with the urgent need to urinate. I waddled into the bathroom, pulled out my package, and just stood there. Nothing came out. I gave it a little shake. Come on now. Don't have all night. Big meeting in the morning, gotta get some sleep. Something was poking around under my skin. It looked like a crawling worm, twisting away just beneath the surface. As if to prove me wrong, my flesh started stretching, like something inside was pushing it further and further outward. This event was accompanied by a flash of burning, unforgiving pain. I screamed, and bucked all the way to the ground, arching my back like the letter C. My daughter Ollie joined in from her room. Papa, you shouldn't have eaten that chili. A fleshy knob burst forth from inside my thigh with a gush of pink slime. I had two thoughts in quick succession. First, it's a dick. Then, no. It's a nightmare. This isn't happening. As my mind was turning things over, my mouth was screaming again. I don't know how long that went on, but eventually Jess was banging at the door. Henry. Are you okay? Henry. Get a knife. I wailed. Cut it off. Oh God, kill it. Please. I'm coming in, warned Jess. No. I cried. But it was too late. She had opened the door, taken one look at the scene before her, and covered her mouth in shock. I don't know what's happening, I sobbed. Then a jet of yellow fluid shot from the head of the thing, and I could no longer pretend that it wasn't a second penis. The physical release of the urine felt supremely satisfying, and for a split second, I felt actually content, until I felt the warmth of my own piss pool up around my knees. Is that, started Jess. What do we do? Call 911. In the morning, it was gone. Even though it would have been hard to miss, I still spent several minutes searching all the folds down there for some sign of it. Where did it go? Asked Jess. I don't know, I said. But you did see it, right? That wasn't just some nightmare, right? Can they? I wondered. I guess it's possible. No less strange than another cock poking out of your thigh for the night and then disappearing, if you think about it. Maybe, said Jess. You better get moving. You're going to be late for your meeting. But that night, it came back. The second night was no picnic either, but nothing will ever be as terrifying to me as that first night.
Sleeping yet? Didn't think so. Next story's up. And yeah, it's worse. You're welcome.
I lost my son in a freak accident 20 years ago, and now he's a king, by odd directions. Do you wish to come and get them? The teacher asked. I did. It was a chance to get to know my son at least a little bit more. The next day, I drove down to the school and met the teacher, now close to retirement age, at the front doors. I usually avoided this part of town. Just seeing the school made it all come back to me, all the memories from that day, the phone call about the accident, the commotion at the school where the parents were first informed of what had happened in more detail, my son's pale face as I held his dead body in my arms against the will of the police officers and with the tears running down my face. Tears that were back now. The teacher hugged me out of sympathy. I followed her inside. The kids played outside at the schoolyard and in the corridors, unaware of the terrible incident that had happened at this place 20 years earlier. Some of them looked at me with curious eyes, wondering how a tall, well-built man such as myself could have trouble holding my tears back. A part of me kept looking for my son among them, almost expecting his face to peek out from a corner. The room where it had happened was torn down for safety reasons and was now a part of the dining room, but the absence of it was just as palpable to me. I stopped and watched the area where it had been, the activity room where my son had taken his last breath. He died doing what he loved, drawing with his friends. 3 other kids had lost their lives together with him that day. They were never able to find sufficient evidence for it, but in the absence of a better explanation, the investigation settled with carbon monoxide poisoning. This way, the teacher said with concern in her eyes. I thanked her again but didn't say much else while leaving the school in a hurry. She didn't mind, she understood my inner turmoil. I had been afraid that the drawings would reveal some inner struggle because of my absence as a father, and it made me glad to see how happy he seemed to have been given how joyful the drawings were. But then I reached the last drawing. The hair in my neck stood up when I saw it. It also depicted the snorbees, in this case jumping around inside a jungle, but they were all screaming out of terror and running away from something. A few of the characters, some of the red circles that looked like humanoid apples, were lying dead on the ground with their insides ripped out of them. And in the middle of it all, there was a tiny, anonymous door standing on a grassy platform that floated in the air. Could this have been what he drew that day, his very last drawing before he lost his life? Perhaps the carbon monoxide poisoning made him confused before. I shook my head to escape these thoughts. My eyes fixated on the little door. There was something about it that felt a bit off, almost menacing, although I couldn't say why. I moved my hand over the drawing, felt the old paper under my fingertips and moved them toward the door. I woke up to the smell of rotten flesh. Right in front of me, laying in some unnaturally light green grass, was the cadaver of. I couldn't believe it. It was one of the snorbees, a blue, spherical being the size and shape of an orange. I stood up. I was in shock, unable to think clearly, but I still managed to realize that something impossible had happened. I had been sucked into the drawing. Cry baby, the voice came from a grown man out of view. You have to eat them. Don't be like the fools, you hear me? I've told you what happened to them. There was something childish about the man, in the way he expressed himself. What is going on? I couldn't hide forever, I thought, and stepped into the opening. The man stopped in his tracks, obviously shocked to see me. He had a long, messy, and blood-soaked beard. He was naked, exposing his emaciated body under a layer of mud. There was blood dripping down on his thin chest from the beard. The limp body of one of the strange, furry beings hung lifeless from his hand, with a large bite taken out of its side. I let my eyes climb from his thin hand to his tired, fatigued face. There were dark circles underneath the eyes, and on top of his head, there was a shiny golden crown. He spoke first. Of course. I could see it in his eyes. How I approached him, tears running down my cheeks, trying to embrace him. You're alive, here. Son, I said. You don't know how much I've missed you. My boy, my boy, my boy. Where have you been, Daddy? I didn't know, I said. I held your body in my arms. You were dead. We buried you. Oh, my son said, Maybe that's why we couldn't return, he said. You moved us away from the door. We used to play here when the teachers didn't look, but one day we couldn't go back. I made this place, he said and stepped forward. You made it? I asked. Yes, I just wish I could remember how I did it. An expression of sadness overtook his face for a moment, but then he smiled almost manically and exclaimed, I'm the king of Snorbitron. I looked at the little girl, speechless. Dad? My son asked, afraid of my reaction. I'll show you, he said, and then he looked down at the little girl with an angry frown and said, Go away now. I don't want to play with you anymore. My dad is here. The girl quickly skittered away and disappeared among the trees. I wanted to stop her and tell her she didn't need to be scared, that I wasn't going to hurt her, but I was distracted by all the thoughts spinning around in my head. My son adjusted the crown, smiled, and wiped some of the blood from his beard with his arm. And then he began walking, taking childishly large steps. I grew out of my clothes a long time ago, he said. But my friends didn't. You'll see. They were such fools. He laughed and yelled, Watch out, the king is coming. The creatures hiding in the bushes screamed in their falsetto voices, utterly terrified. After a short walk, pushing through more and more bushes, we came to what turned out to be the edge of the jungle. At first glance it looked like the jungle continued, albeit much denser, but in actuality it was an impenetrable wall made out of trees and thorny bushes. I could see all the way to the other side. It seemed so much bigger before, my son said. He stood close enough for me to smell his breath. It was foul. It's almost as if it has shrunk. He smiled at me, revealing half-rotten teeth. No, son, I said. You grew up. I guess so. Well, here's Daniel, my son said and pointed at something sticking out of the wall. He tried to escape from me while we were playing royal tag. My son didn't say anything, he just stared down at his dirty feet and blushed, just like the schoolboy he had been back when he vanished. Jonas is over here, my son said. He tried to take Linda away from me, so I pushed this boulder right on top of him. You murdered him. I yelled, out of anger as much as out of shame as a father to what was clearly a deranged man. He blushed again, unwilling to speak. Well, I said. Where the hell is she? He teared up. I didn't know what to do, Daddy. Her mummified body leaned against a tree in the middle of the jungle. She was naked, and her legs spread apart. By the looks of it, she couldn't have been older than 15 years old. It's okay, Dad, my son said. You're here now, aren't you? Now we can finally play together. Forever. That's Florb and Plorb, my son said. They work for me, so I don't eat them. He looked at them with a threatening stare and added, unless they disobey me. He laughed, and the creatures said something incomprehensive in a language that sounded like pretend English on helium. Even though I couldn't understand them, I could still see that they were trying to sound cheerful while hiding in absolute terror. This is going to be so fun, I heard my son giggle from inside the castle. He came out of it with a long sword. Whoa, I said and took a step back. What are you planning on doing with that? Relax, Dad, my son said and fixed the crown on his head. It's a game, I used to play it with the crybaby all the time, but she's always whining and crying. It's so annoying. Daughter? He looked like a living question mark. What are you talking about? She came out of. I don't know what you are talking about, he insisted. Do you know what he's talking about, Florb? The creature known as Florb looked up at my son like a shameful puppy and uttered some nonsensical sounds. The Snorbees took care of her underground, my son said. He raised his sword. I don't want to play any games. I said. I'm your father, you have to listen to me. You can't just order people around like. 10, my son yelled. Why aren't you listening to? 9. 8. 7. That's it, run. 6. 5. There was no way to get through to him. I turned around and ran into the jungle, hearing my son counting down to 0 and then charging after me screaming like a maniac. I was panting. My first thought was to find the door again. I wanted to get out of this nightmare. My son had lost his humanity or never gained it in the first place. However much it hurt me to admit it, there was no hope for him, even if there was a way to get him out. I kept frantically searching for the door, thinking about this, when I accidentally stepped on one of those creatures. It squeaked like a dog toy under my foot. I looked down at it. It crawled half a meter before it died. I thought about how they had taken care of my son's daughter, my granddaughter. I couldn't just leave her here. I'll find you. I found the girl on a floating platform. She sat under a palm tree with blue leaves, petting one of the apple-like creatures. She froze with fear when she saw me. My son was approaching fast. I couldn't afford to lose a single second. "Dee, don't be afraid," I said as calmly as I could, which wasn't very calm at all. "Is that your apple friend?" His smile vanished in an instant. "If you let us go," I said, "I'll come back and play with you forever. Daddy just needs some time to rest. And you know what, I can even bring you some new friends. How does that sound?" "I'm not gonna hurt you, Daddy," he said and laughed. "It's just a game, I wasn't gonna." The girl started to cry. "Boo-hoo," my son said. "Cry baby. Cry baby. Cry baby. I decide who comes and goes," he said. "I'm the king." "No," my son yelled. "Don't leave me here." "Go inside," I said to the girl. "I'm right behind you." She stood there for a couple of seconds, hesitating, but then she took a step forward. Her body fell to the ground, lifeless. Just like I had found my son back when I thought he had died. My son was heaving himself up on the platform. I crawled to the girl, fearing she was dead. She didn't have any pulse. No, no, no. Maybe my son had been right, I thought, maybe it wasn't possible to ever leave this place. My son was just about to stand up. I put myself on my back and said, I mourned my son again because it felt like I had lost him a second time, even though I knew he was still alive in that enchanted drawing, but at the same time, I rejoiced with a happiness I hadn't felt in a long, long time. Because I had saved her, I had brought her back, the granddaughter I never knew I had.
Still here? Aw, look at you. Brave little meatbag. Too late to back down now. Next story's already watching.
2 weeks ago my coworker killed himself over a lost USB flash drive. I found that flash drive today, by J Throwaway 22. My name's Jay. I work in a small office building as a sales associate of a small brand security software. I'm not going to bore you with the details of my unexciting job, the only reason I put up with it is to provide for my girlfriend and my daughter, who was born about 11 months ago. I usually spend most of my time in the office screwing around on the internet and wishing something interesting would happen besides the stupid typical workplace gossip that went around all the time. I wonder, if he had just found the flash drive, would he not have killed himself? Fate works in mysterious ways. While Dan couldn't find what he was looking for, I found it this morning. I was making myself a cup of coffee in the break room and accidentally dropped a packet of sugar behind the coffee station. I bent down to pick it up and, lo and behold, underneath the table there was a red flash drive with a K written on it in Sharpie. Shocked, I picked it up and wondered what to do with it. I mulled it over all day, and eventually decided to take it home and see what was on it. In the pics folder were some nice pictures of Dan and his daughter having fun together at some amusement park that I wouldn't really feel comfortable sharing on the internet. Those are his memories, not something for us to ogle at. The next folder, Roland, was a little more disturbing. It seemed to be a couple of scanned articles. They were a little hard to read, but they all referred to projects being done by some company called Roland Biomech. I tried Googling them but nothing came up. I guess this company experimented with applying certain technologies to help disabled and injured patients. One article referenced an experiment in which the patient had lost all his teeth, so they replaced his entire jaw with some sort of grinding system that would shred the food in his mouth before it went to his esophagus. An addendum on the bottom of the article said that the system collapsed and the patient's entire face sunk into itself, killing him. Another article referred to an experiment done by hooking up machinery into a depressed patient's brain and using software to try and remove the depression by streaming happy images from the internet directly to the patient. At first it was successful, but soon the patient was determined to have been receiving too much information, and she went into a catatonic state after hours of screaming about knowing everything all at once. Then it looked like there were some forms that Dan himself had filled out for Roland Biomech. The applications, which were dated about 3 months ago, documented Dan's personal information, Catherine's comatose state, her blood type, age, and other stuff like that. One yes/no question asked on the forms was, are you comfortable with any alterations, major or minor, that the patient may have after operations have been completed, to which Dan had ticked yes. One of the last articles was the hardest to make out, but to be fair some areas of it were highlighted and notes were scribbled along the sides of it in pen. Now, I'm not a programmer, I just sell software, but I swear the article looked just like program executions and codes. A lot of it was sorted into columns, which were titled things like memories, emotions, problem solving, etc. One of the handwritten notes I could make out read, folder names for input, output, teach/talk. There was also one downloadable file called Catherine.exe. I clicked on the file and a download started, just a colored loading bar launched and nothing else. When it was finished downloading, a small black screen came up with white text that read, Insert command. Here is the sound file uploaded onto YouTube. There are some loud moments, so take it easy on the volume. It is approximately 1 minute and 40 seconds in length. At around 46 seconds in I can clearly hear a cello playing. I also hear at 1:31, who are you? Those Roland people turned that little girl into a computer program, and I just fucking downloaded and communicated with her. Update. In case you can't read it from that photo, the letter says, to home occupant. It has come to our attention that the occupant of this house, Mr. J. Durst, has recently come into contact with property belonging to Roland Biomech or one of its affiliated entities. It is on record that the occupant has intended to redistribute the property, as seen on this site. If you would like to make an appointment with Roland Biomech for our unique charitable services, please consult an operator or any Roland Biomech property. We will be monitoring any further activity we view as questionable. Lana Porter. Security and Property Management.
Something's still listening, and it wants more. Next story. Just don't say its name.
And number X200B. Slowly rising from my chair, I tried to make as little sound as I could while making my way to the door. Peeking my head into the dark hallway, I peered at the living room where the sudden interruption had come from. The room was still, and with the small traces of light coming in from the windows I was able to discern there were no intruders. Letting out the breath I had been holding in, I stepped out into the hallway. Getting a better look at the empty living room, I let out a laugh. I figured I had just been making myself paranoid reading all those scary stories by myself. Still, my heart was racing, slowing down but still fast enough to feel against my chest. I felt it when I went to swallow the saliva in my mouth. The liquid met some resistance as it went down my throat. It felt like my Adam's apple had become swollen enough to barricade my ability to swallow. Lifting my fingers, I felt all over the outside of my neck, but even when applying pressure I couldn't find anything out of sorts. Admittedly, this earned a smile from me and I replied, "Thanks, I'm glad you liked it. I don't know why it's not like I wrote the thing." A quick attempt to push down more saliva reminded me of my predicament. Using the mirror with an open mouth, I did manage to see something resting at the back of my mouth. A small black speck that was reflecting the light that hit it. Pulling my fingers out like a fishing line, I became aware that the thing in my throat wasn't just some black speck, it was a larger object. I could feel something like a string passing through my throat and mouth as I pulled more and more. When I became aware of the feeling, I didn't want to pull too fast and risk injuring myself. When my fingers were far back enough, I was able to make out what I was freeing from within me. I just couldn't get my head around how it got there. It wasn't even something I had in the house, but I remember it from my childhood. The thin black ribbon that contrasted the white teeth around it. I remembered ruining my father's old cassette tapes. The ribbon's gloss reflected the light as I pulled more and more of it out until eventually that feeling in my throat left and all the ribbon dropped into the sink. I started at the mess of ribbon all folded over itself, coated in thick wads of saliva. Even though the lump was gone, I could feel where the edges of the ribbon had rubbed against my throat. Then I put the bottle to my mouth, and sure enough, the juice transformed to rot the moment it passed by my lips. The second story I put on my channel was just like that. Some poor girl had been cursed, and no matter what she did, whenever she tried to eat or drink, the food would become inedible. In that story though, in the end, the girl discovered that human meat tasted so good it was addicting. So much so, that she had to write the story with fewer fingers than I'm using right now. He said he had woken up one day to find that the world outside of his home had completely vanished. All that was left was an endless dark landscape. Within that landscape he, and I, could make out figures that walked around. Figures that were much too large to be any sign of life that could be found on planet Earth. They were huge, towering over the view offered from my window, and yet as they stepped, there was no impact. I was going to come on here and ask for help, for forgiveness. To those I've wronged, I truly am sorry. I should have reached out, taken the initiative. I think it's too late for all that though. The video reached just over 100 views before I deleted it and everything else on the channel. And number X200B.
Need a break? Too bad. These stories don't wait, and neither do we. Next one's worse, in the best way.
I just graduated from medical school, and I think the dead patients are coming back to haunt me, by Beifel's Disciple. I stood up reactively, but not out of shock. She had told me that I was needed in surgery, and I was so terrified of Dr. Vivian Scrit that I didn't want to piss her off by obeying too slowly. The funny thing about emergency surgery, Dr. Aphelis, is that the procedures are rarely planned. She stared at me over her thin spectacles like I was a small child receiving the third simple explanation to a problem that confused only me. I grabbed my hair and pulled tightly. J.D. wasn't a patient, he was a person, and this suffering made no sense. Just like Brutson's agony and death. Or Myron's inexplicable auto-cannibalism. I opened my eyes, and understood that a puzzle lay before me. Not in the past 3 minutes. Yes, doctor. Beep beep beep. What's wrong? Defibrillators ready, doctor. I prepped the defibrillator once more, wondering what would happen with the third round. I was ready for anything. I was surprised. I sent 1,000 volts of electricity into J.D.'s heart, and nothing happened. He didn't move. I dismissed the nurse halfway through so that she might save some patient with a reasonable chance to postpone the inevitable. And I opened my bladder. Ellie, he whispered. His voice sounded weak and far away, like an echo coming up through a narrow cave. I tried to pull away, but he was just too strong. "Your brother, Timmy, is here in hell with me. He wants you to know something," he continued in an unholy reverberation, staring through me with no eyes to focus. "He says that it's your fault he's here, and that if you ever loved him, you'll come down to burn with the rest of us. Every second hurts so much that he wishes he'd never been born." He hissed at me. Then he fell to the table, once again quite dead. Tears were brewing like storm clouds, slow but thick and angry. I could sense the heavy, dewy heat and charged tension behind my eyes, and I could feel my breaking point drawing closer, inevitable and inexorable. She folded her arms. I folded mine. Rule 9, verbatim, now. The morgue must house at least 13 cadavers at all times, I responded without thinking. But when I opened my mouth to speak, not a single word found its way out. "No, child, you're not. All of the dead people you named were smarter and better educated than you. Given the consequences that they've all suffered, do you realize what's at stake?" Unable to find my voice, I nodded. I brushed away a tear. "Maybe you feel it's unfair that the past has changed you, so you want to change the past. Every doctor wants to be a vanguard between life and death. But we know that the latter wins eventually. Why are you here?" I shook my head. "I can't change the past," I whispered. "All I have are myself and the present. One of us is going to control the other." I wiped my nose, wiped my eye, and wished I had done things in the opposite order. She turned crisply around and walked away. I followed without instruction. The funny thing, though, is that nothing is ordinary. I tried, and failed, to steady my shaking breath. I knew that I would go through the door in the same way that I knew I would get out of bed every morning. I had memorized the rules at this point, but it no longer mattered. I swallowed and nodded. The faint smell of smoke invaded my nostrils as I stepped forward. I was wrong. Listen.
Whew, telling gave me chills. But hey, we're just getting started. The next one's sharper. You'll see.
I decided to record the first day at my new house. The comments showed me that I needed to leave immediately, by the poisoned antidote. I'm a relatively small YouTuber. Not terribly small to the point where I get no attention, but not big enough for most of you guys to recognize me. I mainly do creepy urban exploration videos that usually don't capture anything, but I give a horror history of the place while I record around. Definitely going to move now. Every little sound makes me want to jump, including the leaky faucet in my bedroom's bathroom. Until now. After I finish the video, do some basic editing and chop out the boring parts, I upload the video to YouTube and go to bed. I don't really think too much about it while I drift off. 126, WTF was that? Bruh, you think you so slick at 923 putting in some Halloween decor hanging from the shower. 10 out of 10 though, great SFX. 025, 126, 159, 258, 504, 833, 902, 923. How are you not seeing this shit, man? It's maybe hidden on the camera, but you got a peripheral, right? I'm sure if I watch again I'll find more. These were just some of the comments that I read, and all I could think about right now was watching that fucking video. I pop down in front of my desk, open my laptop, click on the file, and go to the first timestamp that everyone is talking about. I pause the video and scan the frame. It was nighttime, and this is just after I opened the front door of my new house, explaining how I had just bought it. The camera is peering inside, looking up the stairs and up to the second floor hallway towards the left, and a couch facing a TV, that can't be seen now, to the right, with an entryway into the kitchen only half visible through the doorway and behind the perpendicular couch. The lights to the kitchen and upstairs are off right now, but illuminated enough by the light in the living room. I scour the entire frame for a couple seconds before I see it. There. On top of the stairs. My blood turns to ice as I freeze in my chair. Where the fuck was it now? In the video, I enter the threshold of the house and walk into the living room, moving my head around to show everyone the details and size of the room. I go deeper into the lore of the house while walking around, showing off my collection of geeky shit to my viewers. Almost immediately afterwards in the video, I headed into the kitchen. So, when I played the video, the head went away instantly from view as the camera angle moved to the entryway of the kitchen. I fast forward to the next timestamp to see it again, shaking as I move the mouse. I didn't need to pause the video to see this one. Shit, the shower 1923 at the end of the video was so fucking terrifying. You know how to make good content, man, and great acting. If it's not acting, run. 9:23. When entering the bathroom, like I did in the video, you couldn't see anything in the shower. The curtains were drawn, and I have unique shower curtains. As in, it was curtains, plural. 2 half curtains that could open up from the sides or in the middle like ones on a window. There was a foot gap in the middle, so that when I was walking in, you could only see the shelf and the safety railing holding my washcloths. You only see it for a second, and with the speed the camera was moving, pausing it made it a little blurry. It took place in the bathroom that was connected to my bedroom, the one right to the left of my desk when sitting at it. But when I walk to my mirror and the video looks through it, the angle was just perfect to the point where you could see the shower nozzle in the distance. My camera only lingered there for a couple seconds, but that was all that was needed. Now you could see the whole head. It had the whole thing shoved through the severed throat opening on its neck, with the nozzle angling downwards and coming out of its mouth. The nozzle was dripping blood and the red liquid was pouring down the shaft of the shower head. But that was not the part that freaked me out the most. It was my head. My fucking head with its mouth gaping open, my curly hair, my forehead, my neck, my ears, my lifeless eyes. All of it was mine. I sat there, frozen, heart ready to simply burst out of my chest like in that scene of Alien, only with more gore. I couldn't think straight. Only one thought was going through my head, and that was to pack up and leave this place forever, and hire someone else to move me out. And then I heard it.
And now, as the hour gets cold, and the shadows stretch long into the corners of your room, it's time.
Yeah. Chew the spooky violin. But seriously? This next one? Even I didn't sleep after hearing it.
I've claimed something coming from you.
What? Just because I sleep in a coffin and collect cursed dolls?
Among other things. This is the final descent for the night. One last story, dragged up from the depths of the disturbed and deranged.
Go ahead. Turn off the lights. We dare you.
This is HorrorSlop.
I was a bloody mess. After the 12-car pileup on the freeway, it was a miracle I was even conscious, albeit just barely. There was only one hospital within a 30-mile radius, so all of us were sent there, some via ambulance, others by helicopter. Overwhelmed with the influx of patients, the staff scattered us all over. I was in a bed normally reserved for the lesser injured out in the foyer, as were some of the others involved in the crash. We were separated only by thin curtains as surgical teams struggled to keep us breathing. If I'm being honest, at the time, I couldn't even remember my own name, let alone what had happened. It all felt so surreal, like a dream I couldn't wake from. We're losing her. My daughter. Yes, my daughter. She looks just like her. Unless I was intoxicated. I could now taste it. The faint, leftover residue of alcohol on my tongue. A slew of doctors rushed over, including some of my own. There were chest compressions, the kiss of life, and a few shocks from the paddles, but it was no use. I watched in horror as her head tilted to face me, lifeless and cold. Leslie. No. My little girl. Please no. You have to save her. My heart broke and my sanity along with it. All I could see was Leslie, lying on a stretcher on her way to the ER, lying on that slab in the morgue, and finally, lying in her coffin at the funeral. Some staff ran over and held me down as I stood up in an attempt to run to the girl's aid. They were about to inject me with a sedative, but it was too late. I was in pretty bad shape, just barely hanging on. This sudden burst of movement did me in once and for all, and my flatline was the next sound echoing through the halls. My time was up. And that was that. Fade to black. Lights out. It was all over. At least I could finally see my family again. Little did I know, things would not be that simple. Backslash backslash backslash. It was instantaneous. There was no tunnel and no light at the end of it. No portal to walk through or pearly white gates to enter. I simply opened my eyes and I was there. Where, exactly? I couldn't be sure at the time. It looked like an ordinary room, covered from corner to corner in a lavish, white overlay. It wasn't what I would call vast, but it certainly was large. Approximately an acre of coverage, if my depth perception could be trusted. After a moment or so, a man appeared before me. Late 50s, maybe. Gray hair. Gray mustache. Turn of the century attire. I took a step back, startled by his sudden arrival. I remained silent, unsure of how to respond. Well, I'm sure you have your questions. Fire away. He was right, I did. He smiled. So I didn't make it. He bore a look of concern. I'm sorry to say, no, you did not. But please, if you'll accompany me on a little tour, I can show you to your room. You may have died, but this is the best place you could have ended up, I assure you. So this is the heaven. I made it here. But didn't I cause that terrible accident? He chuckled. Cause it? No, Jack. Even in your drunken state, you were trying to stop it from the side of the road, yelling over to that lunatic swerving all over the place. The memory was coming into focus. I wasn't driving. I was walking along the freeway with a bottle of whiskey in hand, making the trek to my wife and daughter's crosses where they died years ago. Inebriated, I couldn't run away fast enough when the cars finally collided, caught in the wreckage as soon as the fireworks began. The man watched as the revelation washed over me. Remember now, Jack? I nodded, relieved that I wasn't the reason those people were hurt. That brought me to my next question, a more pressing matter. My wife and daughter. Are they here? Can I see them? Without any other options at my disposal, I hesitantly walked past the threshold of the doorframe and the man followed, shutting the door behind us. He then walked ahead and turned back to me with his arms outstretched. There was a tinge of pride in his voice as he said this. Hall of Operations, I asked, confused. The man was now grinning from ear to ear. This is where the magic happens. A mutually beneficial transaction between angel and human. We fulfill your wildest dreams, and in return, you give us a piece of your soul. For the first time since arriving heaven, I was now worried. You want a piece of my soul? Am I hearing this right? Jack, please, listen to me. As angels, we require the essence of human souls to sustain our life force. From birth, as a measure of evolution, a piece of your soul is sectioned off from the rest. You technically don't even need it. It was always meant to be passed along to us in the hereafter. It's the only part of you we can access. While we extract this piece, you will be locked away in your own mind. We can create for you, your own personal heaven. Anything or any place you want, and it's yours. And even trade if there ever was one. Upon hearing this, I gathered my composure and asked a question. I don't care. I just want to see them again. He nodded in agreement. The young girl continued to cower in the corner, probably scared and confused with no idea where she was or what was happening to her. I took a deep breath and reeled back my initial aggression, now knowing what it was she was going through. It's lovely to meet you, Abby. I'm Jack. Tears forced their way out and down my face. I'm going to make that same promise to you, okay? These men might seem scary, but they're not here to hurt you. They're just going to put you to sleep and give you the happiest of dreams. It's confusing, I know, but you have to trust me. I won't let anything bad happen to you. She looked up at me and stared with an intensely serious look painted on her face, as serious as a 6-year-old could look. You promise, right? A few moments later, he stopped in his tracks. We were at my room. It was the same as the rest in every way, but it somehow felt tied to me. Perhaps I was just projecting. After all, this was to be my final resting place. Say, what happens after the procedure is complete? The man looked at me, puzzled. Yes. What happens then? Do I stay in my dream world? His eyes rolled a bit and his lips scrunched up in contemplation. Yes. That is very much what I want. So, who will be my angel? You're looking at him, Jack. We're all assigned specific souls. You're one of mine. Hearing this, I sat straight up on the table. You bumbling idiot. This one's still awake. We almost had him. The angel rushed off. I followed suit and stood up to make a run for the door. The man was too fast. He lifted me up and pushed me against the wall with incredible strength. His eyes. They turned a dark shade of red. And his teeth. They became razor sharp as his mouth opened wider than any human's could. My eyes darted down at the cart by his side. It was almost within reach. You're lucky, Jack. Not many people have seen an angel's true form. In the distance, I heard the man stumble out of the room and shout a command. Once inside, I looked to the center of the room. Abigail was on the table, awake. That meant the extraction hadn't started yet. Lucien was standing at her side with a cart of utensils now looking over at me, baffled. What's going on? He asked. I didn't offer him any answers. I simply ran over, picked up Abigail, and grabbed another knife from the cart. I then stood in the corner in a fighting stance, ready to fend off any would-be attackers. Mr. Jack, what are you doing? She looked so confused. But you said dash. My blood was now boiling. Lucien, don't. It's all right. I can handle it. Jack, what do you plan to do, exactly? Fight off all of heaven's angels with one silver blade? You see, Jack, we can do anything we want, even this. He held his arm forward and the knife was pulled through the air by an unseen force, landing in his hand. I was now defenseless. I held on to Abigail as tightly as I could. You can't beat us, Jack. You're ours now. It was dark. Well past midnight on Christmas Eve of last year. There were no cars on the road. Not a single one. Everyone was with their families for the holidays, rejoicing and partaking in the festivities. And here I was, on the side of the road, paying my respects to the family I no longer had. There would be no more holidays for us. No more anything at all. I looked down at the unopened bottle of whiskey in my hand. I was 5 years sober up to that point. Didn't even drink the night they died. It wasn't how they would have wanted things to go. At least that's what I told myself, and I believed it. I believed they were still out there somewhere, looking down on me, and that kept me holding the wheel steady. But I realized, in this instance, darkness all around me, not a soul in sight, that I was truly and utterly alone. They weren't with me. They couldn't be. They were gone. These words, now truer than they ever had been before, repeated in my mind as I stared down at the whiskey. It was as if the bottle itself was speaking them, taunting me to put it to my lips and drink away my misery. Half the bottle was gone in mere seconds. I swear I didn't even feel the burn as it swam down my throat. Or maybe it was just dull in comparison to the immense anguish I already felt. Either way, the guilt broke through and came through in waves, bringing me to my knees directly in front of the wooden markers that memorialized my loss. I took one more look at Abigail as the man took his final step in our direction. Wait. Please, wait. To my surprise, he stopped. What now, Jack? Going to grovel for your lives? The angels laughed again, louder this time. No. My entire soul. The whole damn thing. Send her back to Earth, intact, and, when she eventually dies, she's off limits. Agree to these terms and my soul is yours. That's not even possible. We can't take more than a piece. Actually it is. The other angels now adorned looks of astonishment. It was clear that the man knew far more than them, things that were apparently above their pay grade. Yes. Save the girl and I'm yours. A grin I can only describe as being sinister stretched across his face. Very well, Jack. You have a deal. Without warning, I became lightheaded. I saw the man and the angel standing there, but they were now blurred, out of focus. I quickly put Abigail down before succumbing to the dizzy spell and ultimately collapsing to the floor. After a minute or so, I passed out altogether. The next thing I knew, I was waking in a hospital bed, a nurse swapping out fluids on my floor. Oh, you're awake. Glad to see you back in the land of the living. Things were pretty dicey there for a while. That girl who was next to me. Is she okay? What happened? I don't know, sir. Please calm down. Any sudden movements could break your stitching. God, I hope she's okay, wherever she is. Abigail turned around. Not the crash, in heaven. Oh yes, my apologies. In heaven. Abigail looked back at me and smiled, the same way Leslie used to.
And there you have it, dear listeners. One final scream, echoing into the void.
Yeah. Void screams, eternal darkness, I get it. Can I eat now?
We're still on air, Roxy.
Oh no, just the spooky FCC is gonna haunt us for breaking the mood.
If you enjoyed tonight's descent into depravity, don't forget to like, subscribe, and what does he always say?
Stab that bell icon like it's your ex possessed by a demon, and leave a comment telling us what story made you question. I have choices.
And if you survive the night, we'll be waiting.
Same that time, same that crypt.
You're the reason we have complaints, you know that.
You're welcome.